The Gothic sector occupied a position of critical strategic importance within the segmentum obscurus, serving as a vital buffer zone between the malevolent energies of the Eye of Terror and the core worlds of Imperial space. This sprawling region of star systems formed a crucial defensive line, its naval installations and fortress worlds standing as bulwarks against the constant threat of chaos incursions from the Great Rift's malignant influence. The sector's location made it an essential component of the Imperium's defensive architecture, with major shipping lanes and astropathic relay stations connecting the outer rim territories to the heart of Imperial civilization. Within this strategically vital region, several key systems held particular significance for Imperial defense planners. Skindlegeist, with its massive orbital shipyards and naval academies, served as one of the primary training grounds for Imperial Navy officers and a crucial manufacturing center for void-capable vessels. The system's industrial capacity had been developed over millennia, its forge complexes and assembly yards producing everything from escort frigates to mighty battleships for Battlefleet Gothic. The world of Bane Moor, meanwhile, functioned as a critical communications hub, its astropathic choirs maintaining vital psychic links across the sector and beyond, ensuring that Imperial commanders could coordinate their forces across the vast distances of space. The Gothic sector's defensive value extended beyond its strategic position and industrial capacity. Ancient archaeotech installations dotted numerous worlds throughout the region, remnants of humanity's dark age of technology that still functioned despite millennia of neglect and the Imperium's limited understanding of their original purpose. Among these technological marvels, the Blackstone Fortresses represented the most significant and mysterious assets. These colossal structures, 6 in total, drifted through the void like artificial moons, their alien architecture defying easy categorization by Imperial tech adepts and xenoarchaeologists. Each Blackstone fortress measured approximately 20 kilometers in length, their dark stone construction incorporating materials and technologies that predated human civilization. The fortresses possessed devastating weapon systems capable of cracking planets and annihilating entire fleets, though their full capabilities remained largely unknown to Imperial forces. Tech priests had spent centuries attempting to unlock their secrets, managing only to activate basic defensive systems and maintain minimal operational status. The fortress's origins remained shrouded in mystery, with some scholars theorizing they were constructed by an ancient xenos race, while others suggested they might be remnants of human technology from the height of the Dark Age. Abaddon the Despoiler, Warmaster of Chaos and architect of 11 previous Black Crusades, had long coveted these ancient weapons of unimaginable power. His strategic mind, honed through millennia of warfare against the Imperium, recognized the potential these structures represented. Where Imperial tech adepts saw incomprehensible archaeotech, Abaddon perceived instruments of ultimate destruction that could tip the balance of his eternal war against the false emperor's domain. The Blackstone Fortresses offered him the means to break through Imperial defensive lines that had withstood his previous crusades, providing the decisive advantage needed to finally bring the Imperium to its knees. The Warmaster's motivations extended beyond mere tactical considerations. His experiences during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy had taught him that victory required more than brute force and numerical superiority. The Imperium's vast resources and defensive depth meant that conventional assaults, no matter how massive, would eventually be ground down by attrition. The Blackstone Fortresses represented a game-changing asset that could eliminate entire Imperial fleets with minimal losses to his own forces, allowing him to preserve his strength while systematically dismantling Imperial resistance throughout the galaxy. Abaddon's intelligence networks, cultivated through 10 millennia of warfare, had provided him with detailed information about the fortress's locations and defensive arrangements. Chaos cultists embedded within the Imperial Navy and Adeptus Mechanicus had fed him crucial data about Imperial understanding of the structures, revealing the extent of their ignorance regarding the fortress's true capabilities. This knowledge convinced the War Master that Imperial forces would be unprepared for a coordinated assault designed to capture, rather than destroy these ancient weapons. The first signs of the gathering storm manifested as subtle disturbances throughout the Gothic sector during the early months of what would later be designated as the 139th year of the 41st millennium. Warp storm activity, always present near the Eye of Terror, began intensifying with unusual patterns that defied conventional meteorological analysis. Navigators reported increasing difficulty maintaining stable warp routes, with some traditional passages becoming completely impassable due to violent Empyrean currents. These disruptions forced merchant convoys and military patrols to utilize longer, more dangerous routes, stretching Imperial resources and creating gaps in the sector's defensive coverage. Astropathic communications began experiencing unprecedented interference, with messages arriving garbled or failing to reach their destinations entirely. The psychic choir masters on Bane Moor reported disturbing visions during their communion rituals, describing shadowy fleets massing in the void and the sound of ancient machinery awakening from eons of slumber. These prophetic fragments, dismissed by many Imperial commanders as typical warp-induced hallucinations, would later prove to be accurate glimpses of the approaching catastrophe. Pirate activity throughout the sector escalated dramatically, with raids becoming more coordinated and aggressive than typical opportunistic attacks. These weren't the usual desperate strikes by renegade crews seeking quick plunder, but systematic assaults targeting specific Imperial installations and shipping routes. The raiders demonstrated unusual tactical sophistication, striking at communication relays and supply depots with precision that suggested detailed intelligence about Imperial defensive arrangements. Many of these attacks focused on isolated outposts and monitoring stations, eliminating Imperial observation capabilities in key regions of the sector. Imperial patrol fleets began disappearing with alarming frequency, their last transmissions often cut short by static or describing impossible sensor readings before communications ceased entirely. The frigate Righteous Flame vanished while investigating anomalous readings near the Lysaid system, its final transmission reporting massive energy signatures appearing on long-range scanners before the channel went dead. Similar incidents occurred throughout the sector, with entire squadrons of escorts and cruisers simply failing to report at scheduled intervals, leaving behind only empty void and scattered debris fields that provided no clues about their fate. The disappearances followed no discernible pattern that Imperial analysts could identify, occurring across different regions and involving various ship classes and crew compositions. Some vessels vanished during routine patrol sweeps of apparently empty systems, while others disappeared while investigating distress calls or anomalous sensor contacts. The randomness of these losses created an atmosphere of growing unease among Imperial Navy personnel, as crews realized that any mission might be their last. Lord Admiral Cornelius Ravensburg, commander of Battlefleet Gothic, initially attributed these incidents to increased pirate activity and natural warp phenomena. A veteran officer with decades of experience fighting chaos incursions along the Eye of Terror's borders, Ravensburg had witnessed similar patterns of escalating violence preceding smaller chaos raids. His strategic assessment focused on reinforcing key installations and increasing patrol frequency to counter what he perceived as opportunistic attacks by chaos renegades testing Imperial defenses. Ravensburg's initial response involved redeploying several cruiser squadrons from their normal patrol routes to provide additional security for critical systems. The battlecruiser Dominator and her escort squadron received orders to establish a mobile command post near Skindlegeist, while the battle barge Hammer of Retribution moved to strengthen defenses around the Bane Moor communications hub. These deployments represented standard Imperial Navy doctrine for countering increased raider activity, concentrating firepower around high-value targets while maintaining sufficient mobile reserves to respond to emerging threats. The Lord Admiral also authorized increased reconnaissance missions throughout the sector, dispatching fast frigates and destroyer squadrons to to investigate the growing number of anomalous sensor readings reported by merchant captains and system defense forces. These scouting missions were intended to provide early warning of any major chaos fleet movements, while gathering intelligence about the source of the escalating disturbances. However, many of these reconnaissance vessels would join the growing list of missing ships, their fate unknown to Imperial commanders. As reports of missing patrols and coordinated attacks continued to accumulate, Ravensburg began to suspect that the Gothic sector faced a more serious threat than typical pirate raids. The systematic nature of the attacks and the sophisticated tactics employed by the raiders suggested a level of organization and planning that exceeded the capabilities of ordinary renegades. The Lord Admiral requested additional reinforcements from neighboring sectors and began implementing more aggressive defensive measures, including the establishment of fortified patrol bases in key systems and the deployment of hunter-killer squadrons specifically tasked with tracking down the elusive raiders. The Imperial Navy's response also included increased cooperation with local Adeptus Mechanicus Forge Worlds and Astra Militarum garrison forces. Tech priests received orders to enhance sensor networks and communication arrays throughout the sector, while Imperial Guard regiments began fortifying key installations against potential ground assaults. These preparations reflected growing recognition that the Gothic sector faced an unprecedented threat, requiring coordinated defensive efforts across multiple Imperial organizations. Despite these precautionary measures, Imperial forces remained largely unaware of the true scope of the gathering storm. The mysterious disappearances and coordinated attacks represented merely the opening moves in Abaddon's carefully orchestrated campaign to seize the Blackstone Fortresses. The War Master's agents had spent months infiltrating Imperial installations and gathering intelligence about defensive arrangements, while his advance fleets probed Imperial responses and eliminated potential sources of early warning. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the balance of power throughout the Segmentum Obscurus, as the forces of chaos prepared to unleash their most ambitious assault since the Horus Heresy. Unknown to Imperial defenders, vast armadas of chaos warships were already moving through the warp toward the Gothic sector, carrying legions of traitor marines and demon engines ready to claim the ancient weapons that would grant Abaddon the power to finally achieve his ultimate goal of destroying the Imperium of mankind. The magnitude of Abaddon's 12th Black Crusade became apparent only when Imperial forces encountered the full scope of the armada he had assembled for his assault on the Gothic sector. Unlike his previous crusades, which had relied primarily on the raw fury of chaos space marine warbands and demon hordes, this campaign represented a calculated deployment of naval assets that had been gathering strength for centuries. The War Master had learned from his earlier failures, recognizing that capturing and holding the Blackstone Fortresses would require not just overwhelming force, but sustained operational capability across multiple star systems simultaneously. At the heart of this vast armada sailed the Planet Killer, Abaddon's flagship and perhaps the most feared vessel in the galaxy. This massive battleship, originally constructed during the Great Crusade as a Gloriana-class vessel, had been extensively modified and corrupted during its millennia of service to the Dark Gods. Measuring over 20 kilometers in length, the Planet Killer bristled with weaponry that defied Imperial classification systems. Its most notorious armament, the planet-killing cannon that gave the vessel its name, could crack the crust of entire worlds with a single sustained bombardment. The weapons-focusing array, wreathed in perpetual warp flame, drew its power directly from bound demons imprisoned within the ship's hull, their agonized screams providing the psychic resonance necessary to channel such devastating energies. The Planet Killer's hull bore the scars of 10,000 years of warfare, its adamantium plating pitted and scarred by countless battles against Imperial forces. Chaos sigils and blasphemous runes covered every surface, their unholy geometries causing madness in any Imperial crew members unfortunate enough to gaze upon them for extended periods. The ship's superstructure had been rebuilt multiple times, incorporating salvaged Imperial technology, xenos artifacts, and demon-forged components into a nightmarish amalgamation that somehow maintained structural integrity despite violating every principle of rational engineering. Within the planet killer's vast corridors, tens of thousands of Chaos Space Marines from various traitor legions served alongside cultist crews and demon-possessed servitors. The ship's command deck, located deep within its armored core, served as Abaddon's mobile throne room from which he could coordinate the movements of his entire Crusade fleet. The chamber's walls displayed tactical hololiths showing the positions of every vessel under his command, while banks of corrupted cogitators processed intelligence, reports from his network of spies and infiltrators throughout Imperial space. Supporting the planet killer were dozens of capital ships representing the combined naval might of the traitor legions. The Iron Warriors contributed several heavily armored battle barges, their hulls modified with additional weapon batteries and siege equipment designed for planetary assault operations. These vessels, including the formidable warsmith Hansu's flagship Iron Blood, specialized in breaching heavily fortified positions and had been instrumental in several successful siege campaigns throughout the Eye of Terror. Their crews consisted primarily of Iron Warriors veterans who had perfected the art of void warfare during the Great Crusade, their tactical expertise enhanced by 10 millennia of bitter experience fighting Imperial forces. The Word-bearers brought their own distinctive vessels to the Crusade, including the massive cathedral ship Infidus Imperator. This grotesque vessel combined the firepower of a traditional battleship with the spiritual authority of a mobile shrine to the dark gods. Its hull incorporated actual cathedral structures from conquered Imperial worlds, their spires and buttresses providing mounting points for additional weapon systems, while serving as focal points for the dark rituals that sustain the ship's demon-possessed machine spirits. The Word-bearers used these vessels as mobile bases for spreading chaos corruption throughout conquered systems, their holds packed with cultist missionaries and heretical texts designed to turn Imperial populations against their former masters. The Night Lords contributed several terror ships to the Armada, vessels specifically designed to break enemy morale through psychological warfare. The Covenant of Blood, commanded by the infamous First Captain Sevatar's successor, mounted specialized broadcast equipment capable of transmitting horrific images and sounds across entire star systems. These ships often preceded the main assault forces, their transmissions driving Imperial defenders to madness and despair before the actual battle began. The Night Lord's tactical doctrine emphasized swift, brutal strikes against command and communication facilities, disrupting Imperial coordination and creating panic among defending forces. Alpha Legion vessels operated throughout the Crusade fleet, though their exact numbers and capabilities remained deliberately obscured even from Abaddon's own intelligence networks. These ships specialized in infiltration and sabotage operations, their crews trained to impersonate Imperial Navy personnel and conduct covert missions behind enemy lines. Many Alpha Legion vessels maintained false Imperial identification codes and could pass casual inspection by Imperial patrols, allowing them to gather intelligence and conduct sabotage operations deep within Imperial territory. The World Eaters brought their own brand of savage warfare to the Crusade, their ships serving as mobile slaughterhouses where cornate berserkers prepared for battle through ritual combat and blood sacrifice. The Conqueror, Angron's former flagship, had been rebuilt multiple times since the heresy, but retained its distinctive gladiatorial arenas where World Eaters warriors fought to honor their patron deity. These vessels typically led frontal assaults against Imperial positions, their crews driven by an insatiable hunger for close combat that made them ideal for boarding actions and planetary assaults. Emperor's Children vessels brought their own perverse contributions to the Crusade fleet, their hulls modified with sonic weapons and torture chambers where Slaaneshi cultists conducted their debased rituals. The Pride of the Emperor, though heavily damaged during the heresy, had been restored to serve as a mobile palace where the Legion's champions competed in increasingly elaborate displays of excess and corruption. These ships often targeted Imperial cultural centers and pleasure worlds, their crews taking particular satisfaction in corrupting the refined civilization they had once sworn to protect. Beyond the traitor legions, Abaddon had assembled a vast collection of renegade Imperial Navy vessels, whose crews had turned to chaos worship over the centuries. These ships retained much of their original Imperial design and equipment, making them valuable assets for deception operations, and providing the Crusade fleet with standardized ammunition and spare parts that could be salvaged from Imperial wrecks. Many of these vessels had been captured during previous raids or had defected during moments of crisis, their crews gradually corrupted by prolonged exposure to chaos influence. The renegade elements included several entire squadrons of Imperial cruisers and battleships that had been declared excommunicate traitores by the Inquisition. The Merciless, a lunar-class cruiser that had served with distinction during the Macharian Crusade, now flew under chaos colors after its captain had made a pact with demon entities to save his ship from destruction. The vessel's Imperial Eagle had been replaced with the 8-pointed Star of Chaos, while its weapon systems had been enhanced with demon-forged ammunition that could punch through Imperial void shields with devastating effectiveness. Pirate fleets from throughout the galaxy had answered Abaddon's call, drawn by promises of plunder and the opportunity to strike back at the Imperium that had branded them as outlaws. These vessels ranged from converted merchant ships armed with improvised weapons to purpose-built raiders constructed in hidden shipyards throughout the Outer Rim territories. The pirate contingent provided the Crusade fleet with valuable scouting capabilities and local knowledge of Imperial shipping routes and defensive installations. The most notorious of these pirate commanders was Captain Vox Caradron, whose fleet of fast attack craft had terrorized Imperial commerce throughout the Segmentum Obscurus for decades. His flagship, the Bloody Revenge, mounted experimental weapon systems salvaged from various sources and could outrun most Imperial patrol vessels while delivering devastating hit-and-run attacks. Caradron's crews specialized in capturing rather than destroying Imperial vessels, providing the Crusade with additional ships and experienced void warfare personnel. Demon engines formed another crucial component of Abaddon's naval forces, their presence adding an unpredictable element to the fleet's capabilities. These vessels defied conventional understanding of void warfare, their hulls incorporating living demon essence that allowed them to perform maneuvers impossible for purely mechanical ships. The Tormentor-class demon ships could phase partially into the warp during combat, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons, while allowing them to materialize inside enemy formations without warning. The most feared of these demon vessels was the Despoiler of Worlds, a massive construct that appeared to be part warship and part living creature. Its hull pulsed with organic rhythms, while weapon ports opened and closed like breathing apertures. The ship's primary armament consisted of warp cannons that fired concentrated bolts of raw chaos energy capable of tearing holes in reality itself. These weapons could bypass conventional void shields entirely, striking directly at enemy hulls with energies that corrupted everything they touched. Possessed Imperial vessels added another layer of horror to the Crusade fleet, their machine spirits replaced by demon entities that had learned to manipulate Imperial technology for their own malevolent purposes. These ships retained their original appearance and capabilities, while gaining supernatural abilities that made them far more dangerous than their Imperial counterparts. The possessed battleship Eternal Damnation had once served as the flagship of a loyal Imperial admiral before its machine spirit was consumed by a greater demon of Tzeentch, transforming it into a vessel of pure malice that could predict enemy movements through precognitive abilities. Supporting these major combatants were hundreds of escort vessels, supply ships, and specialized craft that provided the logistical foundation necessary for such a massive military undertaking. Chaos-forged ships worked constantly to maintain and upgrade the fleet's weapons and equipment, their tech adepts having long since abandoned the Omnissiah in favor of darker patrons, who promised unlimited knowledge and power. These vessels incorporated forbidden technologies and demon-forged components that enhanced their capabilities far beyond Imperial specifications. The sheer scale of this armada represented the culmination of Abaddon's strategic planning and his ability to unite the fractious forces of chaos under a single banner. Each vessel contributed unique capabilities to the overall force structure, creating a combined fleet that could adapt to any tactical situation while maintaining the raw firepower necessary to challenge Imperial naval supremacy. The War Master had learned from his previous crusades that victory required more than brute force, and his careful assembly of this diverse but coordinated armada demonstrated his evolution as a military commander who understood the complexities of large-scale void warfare. The Gothic sector's defensive architecture had been constructed over millennia to withstand the constant threat emanating from the Eye of Terror, creating a layered system of fortress worlds, orbital platforms, and naval installations that represented one of the Imperium's most formidable defensive networks. These bastions formed interlocking fields of fire and mutual support that had successfully repelled countless chaos incursions throughout the sector's history, their strategic positioning carefully calculated to maximize defensive coverage while maintaining essential supply lines and communication networks. The fortress world of Cadia Minor served as the sector's primary defensive anchor, its surface bristling with orbital defense laser batteries and missile silos that could engage targets throughout the system. The planet's massive underground bunker complexes housed millions of Imperial Guard troops and their equipment, while its orbital ring contained dozens of weapon platforms and sensor arrays that monitored all approaches to the system. Each platform mounted multiple lance batteries and macro cannon turrets capable of engaging capital ships at extreme range, their targeting systems linked to the planet's central command bunkers through heavily shielded communication lines. The Lysade system contained 3 separate fortress worlds, each positioned to cover different approach vectors through the surrounding nebula fields. These worlds had been extensively fortified during the 38th millennium, following a major chaos incursion that had nearly broken through Imperial defenses. Their surfaces were covered with interconnected fortress monasteries and defense installations, while orbital platforms created overlapping defensive zones that forced any attacking fleet to run a gauntlet of concentrated firepower. The platforms themselves were massive constructions, some measuring over 50 kilometers in length and mounting weapon systems salvaged from decommissioned battleships. Stranovar's orbital defenses centered around a series of ancient space stations that had been continuously upgraded and expanded since the Great Crusade. These installations incorporated archaeotech components whose origins remain mysterious even to the Adeptus Mechanicus, their energy output far exceeding what should have been possible with standard Imperial technology. The station's defensive capabilities included void shield generators powerful enough to protect entire continents and weapon systems that could engage multiple targets simultaneously across vast distances. The defensive network's strategic positioning took advantage of natural stellar phenomena throughout the Gothic sector, using asteroid fields, nebulae, and gravitational anomalies to channel enemy fleets into predetermined kill zones. The Quinrock Sound, a region of space where warp currents created navigation hazards, contained hidden weapon platforms that could emerge from concealment to attack passing enemy vessels. These installations operated under strict communication protocols, remaining dormant until activated by coded transmissions from Sector Command. Lord Admiral Cornelius Ravensburg commanded Battlefleet Gothic from his flagship, the Retribution-class battleship Dominus Astra, a vessel that embodied the Imperial Navy's commitment to defending the Gothic sector against all threats. The ship measured 8 kilometers in length and mounted some of the most advanced weapon systems available to Imperial forces, including experimental lance batteries that had been developed specifically for engaging heavily armored targets. Her armored prow bore the scars of dozens of previous engagements, while her weapon decks housed macro cannons whose shells could penetrate the hulls of enemy capital ships at ranges exceeding standard engagement parameters. The Dominus Astra's command bridge occupied a heavily armored section deep within the ship's superstructure, its walls lined with tactical displays showing the positions of every Imperial vessel throughout the sector. Ravensburg had overseen the installation of additional communication equipment that allowed him to coordinate fleet movements across multiple star systems simultaneously, while enhanced sensor arrays provided detailed intelligence about enemy fleet compositions and movements. The ship's crew quarters had been expanded to accommodate staff officers from various Imperial organizations, creating a mobile command center that could respond rapidly to emerging threats. Ravensburg's command structure reflected decades of experience fighting chaos forces along the Eye of Terror's borders, with specialized squadrons assigned to specific tactical roles within the overall defensive strategy. The admiral had organized his fleet into 3 primary battle groups, each centered around a battleship or battle cruiser and supported by appropriate escort vessels. The first battle group, commanded by Captain Darius Maxim aboard the Emperor-class battleship Righteous Fury, specialized in fleet engagement operations and served as the sector's primary offensive striking force. The second battle group operated under Captain Helena Vex aboard the Mars-class battlecruiser Indomitable Will, focusing on rapid response missions and patrol operations throughout the sector's outer systems. This formation included several squadrons of fast cruisers and destroyers that could intercept enemy raiders before they reached critical Imperial installations. The third battle group, led by Captain Marcus Thorne aboard the Retribution-class battleship Emperor's Wrath, provided close support for the sector's fortress worlds and served as a strategic reserve that could reinforce threatened positions. Each battle group maintained its own support vessels, including fleet tenders, ammunition ships, and repair facilities that allowed extended operations without returning to major naval bases. The fleet's logistics network had been carefully planned to ensure that Imperial vessels could maintain operational readiness even during prolonged campaigns, with forward supply depots established throughout the sector's key systems. These installations were heavily defended and could provide emergency repairs and resupply for damaged vessels during combat operations. Ravensburg's tactical doctrine emphasized coordinated fleet actions that maximized the Imperial Navy's advantages in firepower and defensive capability, while minimizing exposure to enemy boarding actions and close-range combat. His battle plans typically involved drawing enemy fleets into engagement zones where Imperial vessels could utilize their superior long-range weaponry while maintaining formation integrity. The Admiral had studied reports from previous Chaos incursions and developed specific countermeasures for the tactical approaches typically employed by traitor forces. The Space Marine presence within the Gothic Sector centered around several successor chapters of the Imperial Fists, whose expertise in defensive warfare made them ideal guardians for the region's critical installations. The Crimson Fists maintained a fortress monastery on Rin's world, though their primary contribution to sector defense came through their fleet-based operations and specialized boarding parties that could be deployed aboard Imperial Navy vessels during major engagements. Their battle barge Crimson Fist served as a mobile command post for Space Marine operations throughout the sector. The Iron Knights chapter had established their fortress monastery on Mordian Prime, where they maintained extensive training facilities and equipment depots that supported Imperial Guard regiments throughout the sector. Their specialization in siege warfare and defensive operations made them valuable allies for the Imperial Navy, particularly in situations requiring the capture or defense of heavily fortified positions. The chapter's Tech Marines worked closely with Adeptus Mechanicus Forge Worlds to maintain and upgrade Imperial equipment, their expertise in both combat and technical matters proving invaluable during extended campaigns. The Black Templars maintained a significant presence throughout the Gothic sector through their crusading fleets, which operated independently while coordinating with Imperial Navy forces during major operations. Their zealous approach to combat and absolute dedication to destroying the enemies of mankind made them particularly effective against Chaos forces, whose corruption and blasphemy triggered intense hatred among the chapter's battle brothers. The Black Templars' fighting companies regularly rotated through the sector, ensuring a constant Space Marine presence that could respond to emerging threats. Several other Imperial Fists successor chapters maintained smaller forces within the sector, including the Excoriators and the Fists Exemplar, who provided specialized capabilities and additional manpower during major operations. These chapters often worked together during large-scale engagements, their shared gene seed and tactical doctrines allowing seamless cooperation even when their forces had not previously operated together. The Space Marine chapter's fortress monasteries served as rallying points for Imperial forces and provided secure communication nodes that could maintain contact even when conventional astropathic networks were disrupted. The fortress monasteries themselves represented formidable defensive installations that could withstand orbital bombardment and ground assault by enemy forces. These structures incorporated the best defensive technologies available to the Imperium, including void shield generators, automated weapon systems, and underground bunker complexes that could shelter thousands of defenders. The monasteries' chapels and training facilities maintained the spiritual and martial traditions of their respective chapters while serving as recruitment centers for new aspirants. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintained several forge worlds throughout the Gothic sector, their industrial capacity essential for supporting the massive naval forces required to defend the region. Forge World Lucius served as the primary manufacturing center for Imperial Navy vessels and equipment, its vast shipyards capable of constructing everything from escort frigates to battleships. The Forge World's tech priests had developed specialized expertise in void warfare technology, creating enhanced weapon systems and defensive equipment specifically designed for naval combat. Forge World Ryza contributed advanced plasma technology and energy weapons to the sector's defenses, their plasma reactors and lance batteries providing Imperial vessels with superior firepower compared to standard Imperial Navy equipment. The Forge World's tech adepts had spent centuries perfecting their plasma technology, creating weapons that could maintain higher energy output while reducing the risk of catastrophic overload. These improvements gave Imperial vessels significant advantages in long-range engagements where sustained firepower could determine the outcome of battles. The Forge World's manufacturing capabilities extended beyond weapon systems to include specialized equipment for ship maintenance and repair operations. Mobile forge ships accompanied Imperial fleets during major campaigns, their workshops and fabrication facilities allowing field repairs that would otherwise require returning to major naval bases. These vessels carried extensive inventories of spare parts and raw materials, while their tech priest crews could perform complex repairs under combat conditions. Adeptus Mechanicus exploration fleets regularly surveyed the Gothic sector for archaeotech sites and lost technology that could enhance Imperial defensive capabilities. These expeditions often uncovered ancient installations and equipment dating back to the Dark Age of technology, though much of what they found remained beyond current Imperial understanding. The tech priests carefully cataloged these discoveries and attempted to reverse engineer useful technologies, though their progress was often limited by the Omnissiah's prohibition against innovation and experimentation. The Forge Worlds also maintained extensive intelligence networks that monitored chaos activity throughout the sector, their auger arrays and sensor stations providing early warning of enemy fleet movements. This information was shared with Imperial Navy commanders through secured communication channels, allowing Battlefleet Gothic to position its forces effectively and respond to emerging threats before they could achieve strategic surprise. The Adeptus Mechanicus intelligence gathering capabilities proved particularly valuable for tracking the movements of Chaos fleets, whose warp-based propulsion systems often created detectable disturbances in local space-time. The sector's defensive preparations included extensive cooperation between different Imperial organizations, with regular joint exercises and training programs that ensured effective coordination during actual combat operations. Imperial Navy officers worked closely with Space Marine commanders to develop boarding tactics and close support procedures, while Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests provided technical expertise for maintaining and upgrading Imperial equipment. These collaborative efforts created a unified command structure that could respond effectively to the diverse threats posed by Chaos forces. The Gothic sector's communication networks relied on a combination of astropathic relay stations and conventional transmission systems that provided redundant coverage throughout the region. The primary astropathic facility on Bane more maintained contact with Terra and other Imperial sectors, while secondary stations on fortress worlds and major naval bases ensured local communication remained possible even if the main facility was compromised. These networks were protected by specialized units trained in counterintelligence operations and equipped with advanced detection equipment that could identify chaos infiltration attempts. The first indication that the Gothic sector faced something far beyond routine pirate raids came when the warp storms surrounding the Eye of Terror suddenly stilled to an unnatural calm. This eerie tranquility, noted by navigators throughout the region, preceded the emergence of Abaddon's vast armada by mere hours. The Chaos Fleet materialized from the Empyrean in a coordinated translation that brought dozens of capital ships and hundreds of escorts into real space simultaneously across multiple systems, their sudden appearance overwhelming Imperial sensor networks that had been designed to detect individual vessels or small raiding parties. The Skindlegeist system became the focal point of this catastrophic emergence, as the Planet Killer and its escort fleet dropped out of warp space within the system's outer reaches. The massive Chaos flagship appeared first, its 20-kilometer hull casting a shadow across the void that registered on long-range sensors as an impossibly large contact. Imperial Navy monitoring stations initially dismissed the readings as sensor malfunctions, unable to comprehend that any single vessel could generate such massive energy signatures. The Planet Killer's emergence created gravitational disturbances that disrupted communications throughout the system, while its warp wake spawned minor Empyrean storms that interfered with astropathic transmissions. Captain Marcus Abrittle commanded the Imperial Navy Patrol Squadron stationed in the Skindlegeist system aboard his flagship, the lunar-class cruiser Defiant Resolve. The squadron consisted of 4 cruisers and 8 escort vessels, conducting routine patrols of the system's shipping lanes and monitoring approaches from the outer system. Abrittle, a veteran officer with 30 years of service in the Gothic sector, had survived numerous encounters with Chaos Raiders and possessed the tactical experience necessary to recognize the magnitude of the threat now emerging from the warp. The Defiant Resolve's sensor arrays detected the first Chaos vessels while they were still completing their translation from warp space, their massive energy signatures creating interference patterns that suggested far more ships than initially appeared on tactical displays. Abrittle immediately ordered his squadron to battle stations and began transmitting priority alerts to Battlefleet Gothic headquarters, though the growing warp disturbances made communication increasingly difficult. The captain's initial reports described contact with an unusually large Chaos fleet, but the true scale of Abaddon's armada remained hidden as additional vessels continued materializing from the Empyrean. The Chaos fleet's emergence followed a carefully orchestrated pattern designed to maximize tactical surprise while minimizing the risk of ships colliding during translation. Abaddon's navigators had spent months calculating the precise coordinates and timing necessary to bring such a massive force into real space without catastrophic accidents. The Planet Killer anchored the formation center, while battleships and cruisers from various trader legions took positions in an expanding sphere that gradually revealed the armada's true size to horrified Imperial observers. Iron Warriors vessels emerged in tight formation, their heavily armored hulls scarred by millennia of siege warfare. The battle barge Iron Blood led a squadron of cruisers whose weapon batteries immediately began charging for combat, their targeting systems acquiring locks on Imperial vessels throughout the system. Wordbearers' ships materialized in cathedral-like formations, their hulls bristling with spires and Gothic architecture that incorporated actual religious structures from conquered Imperial worlds. These vessels began broadcasting corrupted hymns and blasphemous prayers across all communication frequencies, their transmissions causing madness among Imperial crew members who heard the unholy words. Night Lord's terror ships appeared like shadows against the void, their hulls painted in midnight blue and decorated with flayed skin banners that served as psychological warfare tools. These vessels immediately began jamming Imperial communications while broadcasting horrific images of torture and death designed to break enemy morale before actual combat began. The Night Lord's tactical doctrine emphasized swift, brutal strikes against command and control facilities, and their ships moved to intercept Imperial communication relays throughout the system. Captain Abaddon recognized that his squadron faced impossible odds as more Chaos vessels continued appearing on his tactical displays. The Defiant Resolve's augur arrays counted over 40 capital ships within the first hour of the emergence, with escort vessels numbering in the hundreds. The Imperial patrol squadron's 4 cruisers and 8 escorts represented a respectable force for dealing with typical pirate raids, but against Abaddon's armada they were hopelessly outmatched. Despite this tactical reality, Abaddon understood that his squadron's primary mission had shifted from combat to intelligence gathering and warning transmission. The captain ordered his communications officers to begin continuous transmission of tactical data to Battlefleet Gothic headquarters, broadcasting detailed sensor readings and fleet composition analyses despite increasing interference from Chaos jamming systems. The Defiant Resolve's Astropath, sanctioned psyker Lydia Voss, attempted to send psychic warnings through the warp despite the growing Empyrean disturbances caused by the Chaos fleet's presence. Her efforts resulted in fragmentary transmissions that reached Imperial authorities but lacked the detail necessary to convey the true scope of the threat. Abaddon's tactical deployment demonstrated the strategic sophistication that distinguished his 12th Black Crusade from previous efforts. Rather than immediately attacking Imperial positions, the War Master allowed his fleet time to complete its emergence and establish proper formation before beginning offensive operations. This methodical approach reflected lessons learned from earlier crusades where hasty attacks had resulted in unnecessary casualties and missed opportunities. The Planet Killer remained at the formation center, its massive bulk serving as a command nexus, while its weapon systems remained powered but not yet targeted at Imperial vessels. The Chaos fleet's initial movements focused on securing control of the system's key strategic points, including the major shipping lanes and communication relay stations. Fast attack craft and destroyer squadrons moved to intercept merchant vessels and civilian traffic, capturing or destroying ships that might carry word of the invasion to other Imperial systems. These operations were conducted with ruthless efficiency, the Chaos crews demonstrating tactical coordination that belied their reputation for chaotic behavior. Demon engines within the Chaos fleet began displaying their supernatural capabilities as they maneuvered through formations of conventional vessels. These corrupted ships could phase partially into the warp during movement, allowing them to bypass normal space-time limitations and appear in unexpected positions. The Tormentor-class demon ship Screaming Void materialized directly behind an Imperial escort frigate, its warp cannons tearing through the smaller vessel's rear armor before the Imperial crew could react to the threat. The Skindlegeist system's orbital installations detected the Chaos emergence and began powering their defensive weapons, but the sheer scale of the attacking force overwhelmed local defensive capabilities. The system's primary orbital platform, Fortress Vigilant, mounted lance batteries and macro cannon turrets capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously, but its weapons were designed to repel raiding parties rather than full-scale fleet invasions. The platform's commander, Colonel Vex Harrowing, ordered his gunners to prioritize the largest Chaos vessels while transmitting distress calls throughout the sector. Captain Abaddon realized that his squadron's survival depended on maintaining distance from the main Chaos fleet while continuing to gather intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. The Defiant Resolve and her escorts began a fighting withdrawal toward the system's edge, using asteroid fields and debris clouds to mask their movements while maintaining sensor contact with the enemy formation. This tactical approach allowed the Imperial vessels to observe Chaos fleet movements while avoiding direct engagement with overwhelming enemy forces. The Chaos Fleet's composition became clearer as Abrittle's tactical officers analyzed sensor data and identified specific vessel classes and legion markings. The presence of the planet killer confirmed that Abaddon himself commanded the invasion force, while the diversity of Traitor Legion vessels indicated unprecedented cooperation among factions that typically operated independently. The Imperial captain understood that this level of coordination suggested strategic objectives far beyond typical chaos raiding patterns. Iron Warriors vessels demonstrated their siege warfare expertise by targeting the system's communication infrastructure with precision bombardments. Their weapon systems, enhanced with demon-forged ammunition, could penetrate defensive barriers that would normally protect critical installations. The battle barge Iron Blood led these attacks, its macro cannons reducing orbital relay stations to expanding clouds of debris, while its boarding torpedoes delivered assault teams to capture rather than destroy key facilities. Word-bearers' ships began establishing what appeared to be ritual sites throughout the system, their movements following geometric patterns that suggested religious significance rather than tactical necessity. These vessels deployed specialized equipment that created warp disturbances designed to summon demon reinforcements and corrupt local space-time. The cathedral ship Infidus Imperator served as the focal point for these activities, its corrupted spires broadcasting unholy energies that caused reality itself to weaken in surrounding areas. The Night Lord's Terror Fleet concentrated on psychological warfare operations, their ships broadcasting continuous streams of horrific images and sounds designed to break Imperial morale. These transmissions penetrated Imperial communication networks and reached civilian populations throughout the system, causing panic and despair that undermined organized resistance efforts. The Terror ships also deployed specialized boarding parties trained to capture rather than kill Imperial personnel, taking prisoners who would later serve as subjects for elaborate torture displays. Captain Abrittle's squadron maintained its reconnaissance mission despite increasing pressure from Chaos Hunter-killer groups that sought to eliminate Imperial observers. The cruiser Valiant Dawn suffered critical damage when a Night Lord's Terror ship materialized from behind an asteroid and raked her hull with concentrated fire from close range. The Imperial vessel's captain, Commander Sarah Thorne, managed to extract her ship from the engagement but lost her primary sensor array and communication systems in the process. The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as more Chaos vessels completed their emergence and began coordinated attacks on Imperial positions throughout the system. Abaddon's fleet demonstrated capabilities that exceeded typical Chaos raiding forces, including advanced sensor systems that could track Imperial vessels through conventional stealth measures and communication networks that remained functional despite Imperial jamming attempts. The War Master's strategic planning became evident as his forces systematically eliminated Imperial observation posts and communication relays while preserving key infrastructure for future use. The planet killer began moving toward the system's inner regions, its massive bulk accompanied by a protective screen of battleships and cruisers that maintained overlapping fields of fire around the flagship. The vessel's approach created gravitational anomalies that disrupted normal space traffic and interfered with Imperial navigation systems. Its weapon systems remained powered but not yet firing, suggesting that Abaddon intended to preserve the system's infrastructure rather than simply destroying everything in his path. Captain Abrittle recognized that his squadron's intelligence gathering mission had gathered sufficient data to warn Imperial authorities about the invasion's scale and composition. The Defiant Resolve's communication systems had recorded detailed sensor readings of over 60 Chaos capital ships and hundreds of escort vessels, while tactical analysis had identified the presence of multiple traitor legions operating under unified command. This information represented crucial intelligence that could help Battlefleet Gothic prepare appropriate countermeasures. The Imperial squadron's withdrawal toward the system edge brought them into contact with additional Chaos forces that had been positioned to prevent exactly such escape attempts. Fast attack craft and destroyer squadrons moved to intercept the Imperial vessels, their superior numbers and positioning creating a tactical situation that offered little hope for successful extraction. Captain Abaddon understood that his squadron faced annihilation, but their sacrifice would serve a greater purpose if they could successfully transmit their intelligence to Imperial authorities. The Defiant Resolve's final transmission burst contained compressed tactical data describing the Chaos Fleet's composition, estimated strength, and observed capabilities. This information reached Battlefleet Gothic headquarters despite increasing warp interference, providing Lord Admiral Ravensburg with his first accurate assessment of the threat facing the Gothic sector. The transmission's technical data revealed the presence of demon engines, possessed Imperial vessels, and weapon systems that exceeded normal Chaos capabilities, confirming that Abaddon's 12th Black Crusade represented an unprecedented threat to Imperial security. The intelligence gathered from Captain Abaddon's doomed squadron reached Lord Admiral Ravensburg within hours of the Skindlegeist emergence, though the fragmented nature of the transmissions initially obscured the true strategic objective behind Abaddon's massive fleet deployment. Imperial analysts working through the night at Battlefleet Gothic headquarters struggled to comprehend why the War Master would commit such overwhelming force to what appeared to be a conventional invasion of the Gothic sector. The tactical data revealed Chaos forces moving with unprecedented coordination and purpose, but their specific targets remained unclear until reconnaissance flights from neighboring systems began reporting similar fleet movements throughout the region. The pattern that emerged from these scattered reports painted a chilling picture of Abaddon's strategic intentions. Rather than concentrating his entire armada for a single decisive assault, the War Master had divided his forces into multiple task groups, each targeting systems that contained one of the 6 Blackstone Fortresses scattered throughout the Gothic sector. This systematic approach represented a fundamental shift from the chaotic, opportunistic raids that had characterized previous Black Crusades, revealing a level of strategic planning that Imperial commanders had not anticipated from Chaos forces. The Blackstone Fortresses themselves had been objects of fascination and frustration for Imperial tech adepts since their discovery during the early years of the Great Crusade. These massive constructs, each measuring approximately 20 kilometers in length, drifted through the void like artificial moons whose origins predated human civilization by millions of years. Their dark stone construction incorporated materials that defied classification by Imperial scientists, while their internal architecture followed geometric principles that seemed to violate basic laws of physics and engineering. Magos Dominus Castaboras of Forge World Lucius had spent 3 decades studying the fortress designated Blackstone Fortress Alpha, located in the Lysaid system. His extensive research had revealed tantalizing glimpses of the structure's true capabilities, though much of its technology remained beyond Imperial understanding. The fortress contained vast chambers filled with crystalline matrices that pulsed with unknown energies, while its weapon systems incorporated focusing arrays that could channel power levels equivalent to entire star systems. The Tech Adepts reports described machinery that operated according to principles that predated the Omnissiah's teachings, suggesting origins that stretched back to the galaxy's primordial past. Archaeological evidence suggested that the Blackstone Fortresses had been constructed during the War in Heaven, that ancient conflict between the Necrons and the Old Ones that had shaped the galaxy's current form. Fragmentary records recovered from Necron tomb worlds indicated that these structures had served as weapons of unimaginable destructive potential, capable of extinguishing stars and shattering entire worlds with focused energy discharges. The fortress's creators had designed them as instruments of ultimate warfare, tools that could reshape the very fabric of space-time according to their wielder's will. The War in Heaven had ended over 60 million years ago, leaving behind scattered remnants of technologies that current galactic civilizations could barely comprehend. The Blackstone Fortresses represented perhaps the most intact examples of this ancient engineering, their systems preserved through millennia of dormancy, while waiting for beings capable of understanding their true purpose. Imperial tech priests had managed to activate basic defensive systems and maintain minimal operational status, but the fortress's full capabilities remained locked behind security protocols that no human mind could decipher. Each fortress contained a central control chamber dominated by a massive crystalline structure that served as both power source and command interface. These crystals pulsed with energies that registered on Imperial sensors as concentrated warp disturbances, though their actual nature remained mysterious even to the most learned tech adepts. Attempts to interface directly with these control systems had resulted in catastrophic failures, with several tech priests suffering complete neural breakdown after exposure to information patterns their augmented minds could not process. The fortress's weapon systems incorporated technologies that operated on principles completely foreign to Imperial understanding. Primary armament consisted of massive energy projectors that could focus stellar energies into concentrated beams capable of cracking planetary crusts or annihilating entire fleets. These weapons drew power from the fortress's central crystals through conduits that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, allowing energy transfer rates that should have been impossible according to known physics. Secondary weapon systems included defensive arrays that could generate protective barriers extending for thousands of kilometers around each fortress. These shields operated differently from Imperial void shield technology, creating spatial distortions that deflected incoming attacks rather than simply absorbing their energy. The barriers could selectively allow friendly vessels to pass while maintaining complete protection against enemy fire, though Imperial forces had never successfully activated these systems at full capacity. The fortress's propulsion systems represented another technological marvel that defied Imperial comprehension. Rather than using conventional engines, these structures could manipulate gravitational fields to achieve faster-than-light travel without entering the warp. This capability allowed them to move between star systems while maintaining full operational status, making them mobile weapons platforms of unprecedented strategic value. Imperial attempts to understand this technology had yielded only fragmentary insights, with most research efforts ending in failure or disaster. Abaddon's interest in the Blackstone Fortresses stemmed from intelligence gathered during previous Black Crusades, when his forces had encountered these structures and witnessed demonstrations of their incredible power. The War Master possessed ancient texts and data cores that contained references to the fortress's true capabilities, knowledge that had been preserved within the Eye of Terror since the Horus Heresy. His strategic planning for the 12th Black Crusade centered on the belief that controlling these weapons would provide him with the means to finally break Imperial resistance throughout the galaxy. The War Master's approach to capturing the fortresses demonstrated his evolution as a military commander who understood the importance of coordinated operations and strategic patience. Rather than attempting to seize all 6 structures simultaneously, his plan involved systematic capture operations that would allow each fortress to be properly secured before moving to the next target. This methodical approach reflected lessons learned from previous crusades where hasty actions had resulted in missed opportunities and unnecessary casualties. Imperial defensive preparations around the Blackstone Fortresses had been minimal, reflecting the widespread belief that these structures were essentially inert archaeological curiosities rather than functional weapons. Most fortresses were protected by standard orbital defense platforms and patrol squadrons, forces adequate for deterring pirate raids, but completely insufficient for repelling a coordinated assault by Chaos fleets. The Imperial Navy's defensive doctrine had not anticipated that enemy forces would specifically target these ancient structures, leaving them vulnerable to capture by determined attackers. Lord Admiral Ravensburg's immediate response to the emerging threat involved redeploying Battlefleet Gothic's available forces to reinforce the systems containing Blackstone Fortresses. The Admiral understood that allowing these structures to fall into Chaos hands would represent a strategic catastrophe that could tip the balance of power throughout the Segmentum Obscurus. His orders dispatched battle groups to each threatened system with instructions to prevent enemy capture of the fortresses by any means necessary, including their destruction if capture appeared imminent. The first battle group, commanded by Captain Darius Maxim aboard the Emperor-class battleship Righteous Fury, received orders to proceed immediately to the Lysaid system, where Blackstone Fortress Alpha faced imminent assault by Iron Warriors forces. The battle group's composition included 2 additional cruisers and 8 escort vessels, a respectable force for normal operations, but potentially inadequate against the massive Chaos fleets now operating throughout the sector. Captain Maxim's tactical briefing emphasized the critical importance of preventing enemy capture of the fortress while gathering intelligence about Chaos capabilities and intentions. The second battle group under Captain Helena Vex aboard the Mars-class battlecruiser Indomitable will move to defend Blackstone Fortress Beta in the Stranavar system. Intelligence reports indicated that word-bearers vessels were approaching this location, their cathedral ships broadcasting corrupted hymns that caused warp disturbances throughout the surrounding region. Captain Vex's orders included specific instructions to maintain maximum distance from enemy vessels to avoid exposure to Chaos corruption effects, while using the battle group's superior long-range firepower to engage enemy forces before they could close to boarding range. The third battle group, led by Captain Marcus Thorne aboard the Retribution-class battleship Emperor's Wrath, received the most challenging assignment of defending Blackstone Fortress Gamma in the Quinrox Sound. This location's natural navigation hazards made it difficult for Imperial reinforcements to reach the fortress quickly, while the same obstacles could provide cover for approaching Chaos forces. Captain Thorne's tactical plan involved using the system's asteroid fields and gravitational anomalies to his advantage, positioning his vessels to engage enemy forces as they emerged from the hazardous approach routes. The remaining 3 Blackstone fortresses faced similar threats from other elements of Abaddon's divided armada, with Night Lord's terror fleets, Alpha Legion infiltration forces, and renegade Imperial Navy squadrons moving to capture these ancient weapons. Each assault force had been carefully selected based on the specific challenges presented by their target locations, demonstrating the War Master's detailed understanding of both the fortress's defensive arrangements and the tactical capabilities of his subordinate commanders. Imperial attempts to activate the Blackstone Fortress's defensive systems met with limited success, as most tech adepts lacked the knowledge necessary to operate these ancient weapons effectively. Mago's Dominus Castaboras made desperate attempts to unlock additional capabilities from Fortress Alpha, his research teams working around the clock to decipher control sequences and activation protocols. The tech adepts' efforts yielded some progress, managing to bring several secondary weapon systems online and strengthening the fortress's defensive barriers, but the structure's primary armament remained beyond Imperial control. The Adeptus Mechanicus response to the crisis involved deploying specialized tech priest teams to each threatened fortress, their mission being to either activate the structure's defenses or ensure their destruction if capture became inevitable. These teams carried advanced demolition charges and virus bombs capable of rendering the fortresses inoperative, though such extreme measures would eliminate any possibility of future Imperial research into their technologies. The decision to potentially destroy these irreplaceable archaeological treasures reflected the desperate nature of the situation and the recognition that their capture by Chaos forces would represent an even greater loss. Eldar forces began appearing throughout the Gothic Sector as news of the Blackstone fortresses' threatened capture spread through their Farseer's prophetic visions. Craftworld Ulthwi dispatched a war host led by Farseer Eldred Ulthrin, whose precognitive abilities had revealed glimpses of the catastrophic future that would result from these weapons falling under Chaos control. The Eldar's warnings to Imperial commanders spoke of galaxy-spanning destruction and the awakening of powers that had slumbered since the war in heaven, though their cryptic messages provided little specific guidance about preventing such outcomes. The Eldar intervention took the form of surgical strikes against specific Chaos vessels and installations, their attacks designed to disrupt enemy coordination rather than engage in direct fleet combat. Eldar forces possessed detailed knowledge of the Blackstone Fortresses' true capabilities, understanding gained through their race's ancient memories of the war in Heaven period. This knowledge made them valuable allies for Imperial forces, though their secretive nature and refusal to share critical information frustrated human commanders who desperately needed tactical intelligence about the ancient weapons. Farseer Ulthran's prophecies spoke of the Blackstone Fortresses as keys that could unlock powers capable of reshaping the galaxy's fundamental structure. United under Chaos control, these weapons could serve as focusing arrays for rituals that would tear permanent rifts in reality, allowing the powers of the warp to pour into real space without restriction. The Farseer's visions showed worlds consumed by demon armies, star systems transformed into hellish realms where the laws of physics no longer applied, and the ultimate triumph of chaos over all ordered existence. The Eldar response included attempts to sabotage the fortress's control systems, their infiltration specialists using advanced technology to introduce subtle flaws that would prevent proper activation by chaos forces. These sabotage efforts required precise timing and coordination, as the Eldar had to avoid detection by both Imperial defenders and approaching Chaos fleets while working within the fortress's alien architecture. The success of these operations would depend on the Eldar's ability to access critical systems without triggering defensive protocols that could destroy the structures entirely. Imperial scorched earth preparations began throughout the Gothic Sector as military commanders recognized that preventing Chaos capture of the Blackstone Fortresses might require extreme measures. Demolition teams received orders to prepare charges capable of destroying critical infrastructure and denying valuable resources to enemy forces, while evacuation protocols were activated for civilian populations in threatened systems. These preparations reflected the grim reality that Imperial forces might need to sacrifice entire star systems to prevent the ancient weapons from falling into Chaos hands. The psychological impact of the Blackstone Fortress threat extended beyond immediate tactical considerations, as Imperial forces struggled to comprehend the true scale of the danger they faced. Reports of the fortress's capabilities during the war in Heaven spoke of weapons that could extinguish stars and reshape entire sectors according to their wielder's will, powers that exceeded anything in current Imperial arsenals. The prospect of such weapons under Chaos control created an atmosphere of desperation that influenced every aspect of Imperial defensive planning. The escalating crisis throughout the Gothic sector brought forth individuals whose actions would shape the course of the entire conflict, men and women whose decisions in the crucible of void warfare would determine whether ancient weapons of unimaginable power fell into the hands of Chaos or remained beyond the reach of those who would use them to reshape the galaxy according to their malevolent will. Among the Imperial defenders, Lord Admiral Cornelius Ravensburg emerged as the central figure, coordinating resistance efforts across multiple star systems. His strategic acumen and decades of experience fighting Chaos incursions along the Eye of Terror's borders proving invaluable as Imperial forces struggled to comprehend the true scope of Abaddon's ambitious campaign. Ravensburg commanded from his flagship Dominus Astra with the methodical precision of a career naval officer who had witnessed the horrors that emerged from the warp during his 37 years of service. His weathered features bore the scars of previous void battles, including a distinctive mark across his left cheek from shrapnel that had penetrated his command bridge during the Cadian Gate incident. The Lord Admiral's approach to fleet command emphasized careful coordination between different Imperial organizations, understanding that victory against Chaos forces required unified effort rather than the traditional competition between Navy, Space Marine, and Mechanicus elements that often hampered Imperial military operations. The Admiral's tactical doctrine reflected hard-won experience gained through numerous engagements with Chaos raiders and renegade fleets. His battle plans typically involved drawing enemy forces into predetermined engagement zones, where Imperial vessels could maximize their advantages in long-range firepower and formation discipline, while minimizing exposure to the unpredictable supernatural abilities that chaos forces often employed. Ravensburg had studied reports from previous Black Crusades and developed specific countermeasures for the psychological warfare tactics and corruption effects that traitor forces used to undermine Imperial morale and unit cohesion. Ravensburg's command staff included officers drawn from various Imperial organizations, creating a unified headquarters that could coordinate responses across traditional institutional boundaries. Captain Lysander Dorn, his chief of staff, had served with distinction during the Macharian Crusade and brought extensive experience in large-scale fleet operations to the Admiral's planning efforts. Commander Sarah Vex handled intelligence analysis and threat assessment, her background in counterinsurgency operations proving valuable for understanding chaos infiltration tactics and identifying potential security breaches within Imperial forces. The Lord Admiral's strategic planning took into account the unique challenges posed by the Blackstone Fortresses, ancient weapons whose capabilities remained largely unknown to Imperial forces. His deployment orders reflected the difficult balance between concentrating sufficient firepower to defend these critical assets while maintaining adequate coverage of other strategic targets throughout the sector. Ravensburg understood that Abaddon's campaign represented a coordinated effort requiring systematic response rather than the reactive measures that had characterized Imperial responses to previous chaos incursions. Captain Leoton Semper commanded the Imperial Navy cruiser Dauntless, a Dauntless-class vessel that had served with distinction in numerous patrol actions throughout the Gothic sector. Semper's reputation for aggressive tactics and innovative solutions to tactical problems had earned him recognition among his peers as one of the sector's most capable void warfare commanders. His approach to naval combat emphasized speed and maneuverability, using his vessel's superior acceleration to achieve favorable positioning before engaging enemy forces with concentrated firepower from his ship's lance batteries and macro cannon turrets. The captain's background included extensive experience fighting pirate fleets and renegade vessels throughout the Outer Rim territories, campaigns that had taught him the importance of adaptability and quick decision-making in fluid tactical situations. Semper's crew reflected his leadership style, with officers and ratings trained to respond rapidly to changing circumstances while maintaining the discipline necessary for effective void warfare. The Dauntless had been modified with additional sensor equipment and communication arrays that allowed Semper to coordinate with other Imperial vessels during complex multi-ship operations. Semper's tactical innovations included the development of new boarding procedures that maximized the effectiveness of Imperial assault teams while minimizing casualties during ship-to-ship combat. His methods involved using precision lance strikes to disable enemy vessels' defensive systems before launching boarding torpedoes, allowing Imperial forces to capture rather than destroy valuable enemy assets. These techniques proved particularly effective against chaos vessels, whose crews often lacked the discipline necessary to maintain effective damage control during prolonged engagements. The captain's intelligence network included contacts among merchant captains, rogue traders, and independent operators throughout the Gothic sector, providing him with information about enemy movements and activities that often proved more current than official Imperial intelligence reports. Semper maintained these relationships through a combination of professional respect and mutual benefit, understanding that the sector's defense required cooperation from all elements of Imperial society rather than relying solely on formal military structures. Admiral Constantine Mordian commanded the battle group assigned to defend the approaches to the Lysaid system, his force consisting of the battlecruiser Inflexible and 6 escort vessels positioned to intercept Chaos forces before they could reach Blackstone Fortress Alpha. Mordian's tactical approach emphasized the use of system geography to his advantage, positioning his vessels near asteroid fields and debris clouds that could provide cover, while allowing his ships to engage enemy forces at maximum range. His experience included participation in the Angevin Crusade, where he had learned the importance of maintaining formation discipline during extended void battles. The admiral's command style reflected his background as a former gunnery officer, with particular attention paid to weapon system coordination and fire control procedures. His battle group had achieved exceptional accuracy ratings during training exercises, their gun crews capable of maintaining effective fire even under the stress of actual combat conditions. Mordian's tactical plans typically involved concentrating firepower on individual enemy vessels rather than spreading attacks across multiple targets, a doctrine that maximized the likelihood of achieving decisive results during fleet engagements. Captain Helena Voss commanded the strike cruiser Righteous Anger, a vessel that had been extensively modified for independent operations in hostile territory. Her background included service with the Imperial Navy's reconnaissance branch, where she had developed expertise in stealth operations and intelligence gathering behind enemy lines. Voss's approach to command emphasized flexibility and initiative, training her crew to operate effectively even when cut off from higher command authority or facing unexpected tactical situations. The captain's modifications to her vessel included enhanced sensor arrays and communication equipment that allowed the Righteous Anger to serve as a mobile command post for smaller Imperial forces operating in contested systems. Her crew included specialists in electronic warfare and signals intelligence, personnel capable of intercepting and analyzing enemy communications while maintaining operational security for their own transmissions. These capabilities made Voss's ship particularly valuable for reconnaissance missions and raids against enemy supply lines. Among the Chaos Forces, the traitor known as Ercanthos commanded a squadron of word-bearers vessels that specialized in corruption operations designed to turn Imperial populations against their former masters. His flagship, the Infidus Diabolus, mounted specialized broadcast equipment capable of transmitting corrupted religious messages across entire star systems, psychological warfare tools that could break enemy morale before actual combat began. Ercanthos had served as a chaplain during the Great Crusade before embracing the worship of chaos, his knowledge of Imperial religious practices making him particularly effective at crafting propaganda that exploited the spiritual beliefs of his former brothers. The Word-Bearer's tactical doctrine involved systematic corruption of Imperial worlds through a combination of military pressure and ideological subversion. His forces would typically establish orbital superiority before beginning intensive broadcast campaigns designed to convince civilian populations that the Imperium had abandoned them to face annihilation alone. These psychological operations often proved more effective than direct military assault, as demoralized Imperial forces frequently surrendered or defected rather than continuing hopeless resistance against overwhelming odds. Warsmith Hansu led the Iron Warriors contingent assigned to capture Blackstone Fortress Gamma, his expertise in siege warfare making him the ideal commander for operations against heavily fortified positions. His flagship Iron Blood had been extensively modified with additional armor plating and specialized boarding equipment designed for assaulting enemy installations. Hansu's approach to warfare emphasized methodical preparation and overwhelming firepower, his forces capable of maintaining sustained bombardments that could reduce even the strongest fortifications to rubble. The Warsmith's tactical innovations included the development of specialized siege engines that could operate in void conditions, massive constructs that combine the firepower of traditional artillery with the mobility necessary for space-based operations. These weapons incorporated demon-forged components that enhanced their destructive capability while providing supernatural targeting abilities that allowed them to strike weak points in enemy defenses with uncanny accuracy. Hansu's forces had successfully breached numerous Imperial fortifications during previous campaigns, their reputation for ruthless efficiency preceding them wherever they operated. Captain Vox Karadrin commanded a fleet of pirate vessels that had answered Abaddon's call for the 12th Black Crusade, his ships providing valuable scouting capabilities and local knowledge of Imperial defensive arrangements throughout the Gothic sector. His flagship Bloody Revenge had been constructed from salvaged Imperial Navy components and xenos technology, creating a hybrid vessel that combined superior speed with devastating firepower. Caradhran's tactical approach emphasized hit-and-run attacks that maximized damage to enemy forces while minimizing risk to his own vessels. The pirate captain's background included service with the Imperial Navy before his court-martial and exile for unauthorized attacks on civilian shipping. His knowledge of Imperial naval procedures and communication protocols made him particularly valuable for deception operations, as his vessels could often pass initial inspection by Imperial patrols before revealing their true nature. Caradhran's crews included former Imperial Navy personnel who had joined his fleet voluntarily or under duress, providing his forces with technical expertise that exceeded typical pirate capabilities. Among the unlikely heroes who emerged during the crisis, Captain Mordian Vex commanded the merchant vessel Prosperity's Dream, a bulk freighter that had been pressed into service as an auxiliary transport for Imperial military operations. Despite lacking formal military training, Vex demonstrated exceptional courage and tactical insight during several engagements with Chaos Raiders, using his vessel's cargo handling equipment to deploy improvised weapons and defensive systems. His actions during the defense of the Mordian system earned him recognition from Imperial Navy commanders and inspired other civilian captains to contribute to the war effort. The merchant captain's innovations included the conversion of his ship's cargo bays into improvised fighter hangars, allowing the Prosperity's Dream to launch small craft that could conduct reconnaissance missions and harassment attacks against enemy forces. His crew consisted primarily of civilian volunteers who had received basic military training from Imperial Guard instructors, their lack of formal military discipline compensated by their determination to defend their homes and families from chaos corruption. Rogue trader Quintanus Vex operated throughout the Gothic sector with a warrant of trade that granted him considerable autonomy in his operations against chaos forces. His vessel Stalwart Venture had been extensively modified with military-grade weapons and defensive systems, creating a hybrid warship that combined the firepower of a naval cruiser with the operational flexibility of an independent command. Vex's background included service with various Imperial organizations, giving him contacts and resources that proved invaluable during intelligence-gathering operations. The rogue trader's tactical approach involved using his vessel's legitimate merchant credentials to penetrate enemy-controlled territory, gathering intelligence about Chaos fleet movements and installations, while conducting sabotage operations against critical enemy assets. His crew included specialists in infiltration and demolition work, personnel capable of conducting covert operations behind enemy lines while maintaining their cover as civilian traders. These capabilities made Vex's ship particularly valuable for missions that required stealth and deception rather than direct military confrontation. The emergence of traders within Imperial ranks created additional challenges for commanders attempting to coordinate defensive operations throughout the Gothic sector. Admiral Cornelius Vex of the 4th Patrol Fleet had maintained secret communications with Chaos agents for over a decade, providing enemy forces with detailed intelligence about Imperial defensive arrangements and fleet movements. His betrayal enabled several successful Chaos raids against supposedly secure Imperial installations, with enemy forces demonstrating knowledge of defensive weak points and patrol schedules that could only have come from highly placed sources within the Imperial command structure. The discovery of Vex's treachery came through intercepted communications between his flagship and known Chaos vessels, transmissions that revealed the extent of his collaboration with enemy forces. His defection during a critical engagement near the Bainmore system eliminated an entire Imperial squadron from the order of battle while providing Chaos forces with valuable intelligence about ongoing Imperial operations. The psychological impact of this betrayal extended throughout Battlefleet Gothic, as officers questioned the loyalty of their colleagues and implemented additional security measures that hampered operational efficiency. Captain Darius Kryn commanded the Imperial Navy destroyer Vigilant, but his loyalty to the Imperium had been compromised through gradual exposure to chaos corruption during extended patrol operations near the Eye of Terror. His sabotage efforts focused on disrupting Imperial communication networks and supply lines, actions that appeared to result from enemy action rather than internal betrayal. Kryn's position as a patrol commander gave him access to information about Imperial fleet movements and defensive preparations, intelligence that he systematically transmitted to Chaos forces through coded messages embedded in routine operational reports. The captain's corruption manifested gradually through exposure to warp energies and contact with Chaos cultists who had infiltrated civilian populations throughout the Gothic Sector. His transformation from loyal Imperial officer to willing collaborator demonstrated the insidious nature of Chaos influence, as his betrayal went undetected for months while causing significant damage to Imperial defensive capabilities. The discovery of his treachery required extensive investigation by Inquisition agents, who uncovered a network of corrupted personnel that extended throughout multiple Imperial organizations. Tech adept Vanus Kryn of Forge World Lucius had been conducting unauthorized research into forbidden technologies for several years before the 12th Black Crusade began, his investigations into ancient xenos artifacts leading him to make contact with Chaos forces seeking similar knowledge. His position within the Adeptus Mechanicus gave him access to critical technical information about Imperial defensive systems and weapon capabilities, data that he shared with enemy forces in exchange for access to corrupted technological innovations. His sabotage efforts focused on introducing subtle flaws into Imperial equipment and defensive systems, creating vulnerabilities that Chaos forces could exploit during actual combat operations. The tech adept's betrayal proved particularly damaging because his technical expertise allowed him to create problems that appeared to result from equipment failure rather than deliberate sabotage. His modifications to Imperial sensor networks created blind spots that enemy forces could exploit for surprise attacks, while his alterations to weapon systems reduced their effectiveness during critical engagements. The discovery of his treachery required extensive technical investigation to identify and correct the damage he had caused to Imperial defensive capabilities throughout the Gothic Sector. The Gothic Sector's defensive network centered around several fortress worlds, whose strategic importance had been recognized since the earliest days of Imperial expansion into the region. These bastions represented millennia of military engineering and fortification efforts, their orbital platforms and surface installations forming interlocking fields of fire that could engage enemy fleets across multiple star systems simultaneously. The fortress world of Cadia Minor anchored the sector's primary defensive line, its surface covered with massive lance batteries and missile complexes that drew power from the planet's core through geothermal tapping stations buried kilometers beneath the surface. The planet's orbital ring consisted of 47 separate weapon platforms, each mounting multiple macro cannon batteries and lance arrays capable of engaging capital ships at extreme range. These installations had been constructed using materials salvaged from decommissioned Imperial Navy vessels, their armor plating consisting of layered adamantium and ceramic composites that could withstand sustained bombardment from enemy fleets. The platform's weapon systems incorporated advanced targeting cogitators that maintained firing solutions on multiple targets simultaneously, their machine spirits trained through centuries of combat simulations and live-fire exercises. Stranavar's defensive arrangements reflected the system's role as a critical manufacturing center for Imperial Navy vessels and equipment. The planet's 3 orbital shipyards operated under constant protection from defensive platforms that mounted specialized anti-ship weapons designed to engage targets attempting to approach the construction facilities. These platforms incorporated void shield generators powerful enough to protect entire orbital complexes, their energy requirements supplied by plasma reactors that had been upgraded with technology recovered from ancient archaeotech sites throughout the sector. The system's asteroid belt contained dozens of hidden weapon platforms that remained dormant until activated by coded transmissions from system command centers. These installations operated as automated defense nodes, their weapon systems programmed to engage any vessel displaying chaos signatures or failing to provide proper Imperial identification codes. The platform's concealment within natural asteroid formations made them nearly impossible to detect until they began firing, creating surprise attack capabilities that could devastate enemy formations attempting to approach the system's inner regions. Lysades maintained its defensive posture through a combination of natural obstacles and constructed fortifications that channeled approaching enemy fleets into predetermined engagement zones. The system's nebula fields created navigation hazards that forced enemy vessels to follow specific approach routes, while hidden sensor arrays monitored all movement through these restricted passages. Imperial defenders had spent decades mapping safe corridors through the nebulae, knowledge that gave them significant tactical advantages when engaging enemy forces unfamiliar with local conditions. The system's 3 fortress worlds operated as mutual support bases, their long-range weapon systems capable of providing covering fire for neighboring installations during enemy assault operations. Each world maintained underground command bunkers connected through hardened communication lines that remained functional even during orbital bombardment. These facilities housed the strategic planning centers that coordinated defensive operations across the entire system, their cogitator banks processing tactical data from hundreds of sensor stations and observation posts. The massive fleet engagements that erupted throughout the Gothic sector as Abaddon's forces closed on their targets demonstrated the scale and intensity of void warfare when capital ships engaged in sustained combat operations. The battle for the Quinrock Sound began when Iron Warriors vessels emerged from warp space in tight formation, their heavily armored hulls bristling with siege equipment designed for assaulting heavily fortified positions. The lead vessel, the battle barge Iron Blood, immediately began targeting the system's communication relays with precision lance strikes that severed contact between defensive installations. Imperial Navy forces responded with coordinated salvos from multiple cruiser squadrons, their macro cannon batteries launching shells the size of hab blocks toward the approaching chaos vessels. The void between opposing fleets filled with expanding clouds of plasma and debris as weapons fire found their marks, Imperial lance batteries carving glowing furrows across enemy armor, while chaos return fire shattered defensive positions throughout the system. The engagement's opening phase demonstrated the devastating firepower that modern void warfare could unleash, with individual weapon strikes releasing energies equivalent to strategic nuclear weapons. The Iron Warriors' tactical approach emphasized systematic destruction of Imperial defensive capabilities, their gunners targeting specific weapon systems and command facilities rather than attempting to achieve quick kills through overwhelming firepower. Warsmith Hansu coordinated these precision strikes from his flagship's command center, his tactical displays showing the gradual degradation of Imperial defensive effectiveness as critical installations fell silent under sustained bombardment. The siege specialist's experience showed in his force's methodical approach, each target selected to maximize disruption of Imperial coordination and response capabilities. Imperial defenders attempted to maintain formation cohesion while engaging multiple enemy squadrons simultaneously, their captains coordinating through increasingly degraded communication networks as chaos jamming systems disrupted standard tactical frequencies. The cruiser stalwart Defiance found herself isolated from her squadron after communication failures prevented coordination with neighboring vessels, her captain forced to engage 2 Iron Warriors cruisers without support from friendly forces. The Imperial vessel's lance batteries managed to penetrate one enemy ship's armor, causing secondary explosions that sent the Chaos cruiser tumbling out of formation with massive hull breaches venting atmosphere and crew into the void. The deployment of Imperial Guard regiments throughout the Gothic sector reflected the recognition that void battles alone would not determine the conflict's outcome, as control of planetary installations and orbital platforms required ground forces capable of defending critical infrastructure against enemy assault troops. The Cadian 47th Shock Troops received deployment orders to reinforce the orbital defense platforms protecting Stranovar's shipyards, their transport vessels running the gauntlet of enemy fire to deliver reinforcements to installations already under attack by Chaos boarding parties. Colonel Marcus Vex commanded the 47th from the command center of Orbital Platform Secundus, his tactical displays showing the positions of Imperial Guard units throughout the facility's maze of corridors and defensive positions. The platform's interior had been designed with defensive operations in mind, its passages incorporating choke points and kill zones that maximized the effectiveness of defending forces while limiting the mobility of attacking troops. Heavy weapon teams positioned at key intersections commanded overlapping fields of fire that could concentrate devastating firepower on any enemy forces attempting to advance through the facility's primary access routes. The Chaos Assault Forces demonstrated capabilities that exceeded typical boarding party operations, their equipment including specialized breaching charges and cutting tools designed for operations in void conditions. Word-bearers assault troops moved through the platform's outer sections in coordinated teams, their power armor providing protection against the vacuum conditions, while their weapon systems remained fully functional in the airless environment. These forces had trained extensively for void combat operations, their tactics emphasizing rapid movement and concentrated firepower to overwhelm defensive positions before Imperial forces could establish effective resistance. Imperial Guard heavy weapon teams positioned throughout the orbital platforms provided the backbone of defensive operations, their las cannons and missile launchers capable of engaging enemy assault troops at ranges that maximized Imperial advantages in firepower and defensive positioning. The 23rd Mordian Iron Guard had established defensive positions throughout Platform Tertius, their disciplined firing lines creating interlocking zones of destruction that channeled enemy forces into predetermined kill zones. The regiment's heavy weapons specialists had modified their equipment for void operations, their targeting systems enhanced with low-light optics and motion sensors that could track enemy movement through the platform's darkened sections. Planetary Defense Force units throughout the sector found themselves facing assault operations that exceeded their training and equipment capabilities, as Chaos forces deployed specialized troops trained for capturing rather than destroying critical installations. The Lysaid's PDF had been organized primarily for dealing with civil unrest and minor pirate raids, their light infantry formations lacking the heavy weapons and specialized equipment necessary for repelling determined assault operations by Chaos Space Marines and their cultist auxiliaries. The PDF's defensive preparations included the establishment of fortified positions around critical infrastructure installations, their engineers working to create defensive barriers and obstacle systems that could channel enemy forces into areas where Imperial firepower could be concentrated most effectively. These preparations reflected standard Imperial defensive doctrine, though the PDF's limited resources meant that many positions lacked the heavy weapons and specialized equipment that regular Imperial Guard units would have available for similar operations. Chaos attempts to establish permanent footholds in real space represented a fundamental shift from the hit and run tactics that had characterized previous Black Crusades, as Abaddon's forces began construction of demon forges and corrupted shipyards designed to support extended operations throughout the Gothic sector. These installations incorporated technologies that violated Imperial understanding of engineering and physics, their construction requiring materials and techniques that drew power directly from warp space. The Demon Forge established in the Skindlegeist system demonstrated the horrific capabilities that Chaos forces could deploy when given sufficient time and resources to construct permanent installations. The facility's central structure consisted of a massive furnace that burned with warp fire, its flames consuming raw materials and transforming them into demon-possessed weapons and equipment. The forge's production capabilities exceeded anything available to Imperial forces, its output including weapons that incorporated living demon essence and armor that could repair itself through supernatural means. Wordbearer's tech priests supervised the forge's operations, their knowledge of forbidden technologies allowing them to create equipment that combined the best aspects of Imperial engineering with supernatural enhancements that provided significant advantages in combat operations. These corrupted tech adepts had abandoned the Omnissiah's teachings in favor of darker patrons who promised unlimited knowledge and power, their research into forbidden technologies yielding innovations that violated every principle of rational engineering while somehow maintaining functional effectiveness. The construction of warp-tainted shipyards throughout captured systems provided Chaos forces with the capability to repair and upgrade their vessels without returning to bases within the Eye of Terror, significantly extending their operational reach and sustainability during extended campaigns. These facilities incorporated demon-possessed construction equipment that could work continuously without maintenance or rest, their supernatural workforce capable of completing repairs and modifications that would require months using conventional Imperial methods. The shipyard's construction techniques involved binding demon entities into the facility's structural components, creating installations that existed partially within warp space while maintaining physical presence in real space. This hybrid existence allowed the shipyards to access materials and energy sources unavailable to purely physical installations, while their demon-possessed workforce could manipulate matter and energy according to principles that defied conventional understanding of physics and engineering. Iron Warrior's siege specialists directed the construction of fortified positions throughout captured systems, their expertise in defensive warfare creating installations that could withstand sustained assault by Imperial forces while providing bases for further expansion of Chaos control. These fortifications incorporated design principles developed during the Great Crusade and refined through millennia of warfare, their defensive arrangements maximizing the effectiveness of available firepower while minimizing vulnerability to enemy assault operations. The siege specialists' construction projects included underground bunker complexes that could shelter large numbers of troops and equipment while remaining hidden from orbital surveillance, their concealed entrances and ventilation systems designed to avoid detection by Imperial reconnaissance flights. These installations provided secure bases for Chaos operations throughout the sector, their defensive capabilities allowing relatively small garrison forces to hold strategic positions against much larger Imperial assault forces. The establishment of these permanent installations represented a strategic shift that Imperial commanders struggled to counter effectively, as traditional Imperial tactics emphasized mobility and rapid response rather than the systematic siege warfare that would be necessary to eliminate well-fortified Chaos positions. The Imperial Guard's doctrine focused on large-scale maneuver warfare and combined arms operations, tactical approaches that proved less effective against enemies who had established prepared defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire and extensive underground facilities. Imperial attempts to disrupt Chaos construction efforts involved deep strike operations by Space Marine forces and specialized Imperial Guard units trained for behind-the-lines operations. Their missions focused on sabotaging critical installations and eliminating key personnel responsible for coordinating enemy construction projects. These operations required extensive intelligence gathering and careful coordination, as the assault forces needed detailed information about enemy defensive arrangements and construction schedules to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing casualties. The Space Marine chapters operating throughout the Gothic sector adapted their tactics to address the unique challenges posed by chaos fortification efforts. Their assault companies, developing specialized techniques for breaching demon-possessed defensive installations. The Imperial Fist's expertise in siege warfare proved particularly valuable during these operations, their knowledge of fortification design allowing them to identify weak points and structural vulnerabilities that could be exploited by assault forces. The escalating construction race between Imperial defensive preparations and chaos fortification efforts created a strategic situation that favored whichever side could complete their installations first, while preventing enemy interference with their construction projects. Imperial engineers worked to strengthen existing defensive positions while establishing new fortified bases throughout the sector, their efforts hampered by resource limitations and the constant threat of enemy raids against construction sites and supply convoys. The systematic capture of the first Blackstone Fortress marked a turning point in Abaddon's 12th Black Crusade that sent shockwaves throughout the Imperial command structure. The ancient weapon designated Blackstone Fortress Alpha had fallen to Iron Warriors' assault forces after a brutal 3-day siege that demonstrated both the Warmaster's tactical evolution and the terrifying potential of these archaeotech constructs when properly activated. Unlike his previous crusades, where victory meant simple destruction, Abaddon's forces had invested enormous resources in capturing rather than annihilating their target, revealing strategic objectives that extended far beyond conventional warfare. The fortress's capture began with precision strikes against its defensive systems, Iron Warriors siege specialists using their millennia of experience to identify critical vulnerabilities in the ancient structure's protective arrangements. Warsmith Hansu coordinated the assault from his flagship Iron Blood, his tactical displays showing the gradual degradation of Imperial resistance as key defensive nodes fell silent under sustained bombardment. The Iron Warriors had studied Imperial defensive doctrine extensively during their preparation for the Crusade, their intelligence networks providing detailed information about garrison strengths and defensive protocols that allowed them to exploit weaknesses in the fortress's protection. The assault force included specialized boarding parties equipped with archaeotech cutting tools and demon-forged breaching charges designed specifically for penetrating the Blackstone Fortress's alien architecture. These troops had trained for months in mock-up facilities constructed within the Eye of Terror, their practice sessions using captured Imperial personnel as test subjects to perfect techniques for overcoming human defenders operating ancient weapon systems. The Iron Warriors' methodical approach reflected their legion's expertise in siege warfare, each phase of the assault carefully timed to maximize effectiveness while minimizing casualties among their own forces. Imperial defenders aboard Blackstone Fortress Alpha consisted primarily of Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests and Imperial Navy security personnel, forces adequate for routine maintenance and basic security, but completely unprepared for assault by determined Chaos Space Marines. Magos Dominus Castaboras attempted to activate the fortress's dormant weapon systems as enemy forces breached the outer hull, his desperate efforts yielding partial success as several secondary batteries came online and began engaging Iron Warriors' assault craft. The tech priest's knowledge of the fortress's systems remained limited despite decades of study, his activation attempts hampered by security protocols and control mechanisms that predated human understanding of advanced technology. The fortress's internal architecture proved as alien and incomprehensible as its external appearance, with corridors that seemed to bend space according to non-Euclidean geometries and chambers whose dimensions appeared to shift depending on the observer's position. Iron Warriors' assault teams navigated these passages using specialized equipment that could maintain directional orientation despite the disorienting effects of the fortress's construction. Their power armor's machine spirits modified with demon-possessed guidance systems that could interpret the structure's alien logic. The advancing chaos forces encountered automated defense systems that activated in response to their presence crystalline constructs that emerged from wall alcoves, to engage intruders with weapons that fired concentrated energy beams. The fortress's central control chamber represented the primary objective of the Iron Warrior's assault, its massive crystalline core pulsing with energies that registered on Imperial sensors as concentrated warp disturbances. Magos Castaboras made his final stand in this chamber, his servo skulls and combat servitors forming a desperate defensive perimeter around the control interface while he attempted to trigger the fortress's self-destruct systems. The Tech Priest's efforts failed when Iron Warrior's breaching charges disabled the primary control mechanisms, their precisely placed explosives severing critical connections without damaging the core systems that Abaddon required for his larger strategic plan. The capture of Castaboras alive proved crucial for Abaddon's subsequent operations, as the Tech Priest's knowledge of Imperial activation procedures provided the foundation for Chaos efforts to unlock the fortress's full capabilities. Wordbearer's interrogation specialists employed a combination of physical torture and psychic manipulation to extract information from the captured Magos, their techniques refined through millennia of breaking Imperial prisoners and forcing them to reveal critical intelligence. The Tech Priest's augmented physiology initially resisted conventional torture methods, but exposure to demon-possessed interrogation devices gradually overcame his mental defenses and mechanical pain suppressors. The information extracted from Castaboras revealed the existence of master control protocols that could coordinate multiple Blackstone Fortresses as a unified weapon system, knowledge that transformed Abaddon's strategic objectives from capturing individual fortresses to creating an integrated network of ancient weapons. The Tech Priest's memories contained fragmentary data about experiments conducted during the Great Crusade, when Imperial forces had briefly succeeded in linking two fortresses together and achieving power outputs that exceeded the sum of their individual capabilities. This intelligence confirmed the War Master's suspicions about the fortress's true potential and provided the technical foundation necessary for implementing his ultimate strategy. Abaddon's personal involvement in activating the captured fortress demonstrated his evolution from a purely military commander to a figure who understood the supernatural forces that governed Chaos operations. The War Master's approach to the fortress's crystalline core involved ritualistic elements that combined his knowledge of ancient technologies with his mastery of warp-based energies, his centuries of experience within the Eye of Terror having taught him how to interface with systems that operated according to principles beyond conventional understanding. The activation process required blood sacrifice and psychic manipulation, techniques that allowed Chaos forces to bypass security protocols that had been designed to prevent unauthorized access. The fortress's awakening under Chaos control created phenomena that defied Imperial understanding of physics and engineering, its weapon systems drawing power from sources that existed partially within warp space while maintaining physical presence in real space. The primary armament consisted of massive energy projectors that could focus stellar energies into concentrated beams capable of cracking planetary crusts or annihilating entire fleets, their targeting systems enhanced with demon-possessed machine spirits that could predict enemy movements through precognitive abilities. Secondary weapons included defensive arrays that generated spatial distortions, creating protective barriers that could deflect incoming attacks while selectively allowing friendly vessels to pass through the defensive perimeter. The successful activation of Blackstone Fortress Alpha provided Abaddon with his first demonstration of the weapon's true capabilities, their power output exceeding his most optimistic projections and confirming the strategic value of his ambitious campaign. The fortress's energy readings registered levels that approached those of stellar phenomena, their weapon systems capable of engaging targets across interplanetary distances while maintaining accuracy sufficient to strike specific installations on planetary surfaces. The War Master's tactical assessments revealed that a single fortress could eliminate entire Imperial fleet formations while remaining beyond the range of conventional return fire, providing Chaos forces with unprecedented advantages in void warfare operations. coordination of multiple Blackstone fortresses represented the next phase of Abaddon's strategy, his forces working to capture additional structures while establishing the communication networks necessary for unified operation. The technical challenges involved in linking the fortresses required expertise that exceeded normal chaos capabilities, forcing the War Master to rely on corrupted tech priests and demon-possessed cogitators to create the interface systems necessary for coordinated control. These efforts involved combining Imperial technology with warp-based enhancements, creating hybrid systems that violated every principle of rational engineering while somehow maintaining functional effectiveness. The capture of Blackstone Fortress Beta in the Stranavar system followed a similar pattern to the Alpha Assault, though Word-Bearer's forces encountered heavier resistance from Imperial defenders who had received warning about Iron Warrior's tactics and prepared countermeasures accordingly. The fortress's Imperial garrison included elements of the Crimson Fist Space Marine chapter, their expertise in defensive warfare creating additional challenges for attacking Chaos forces. The Space Marines had established defensive positions throughout the fortress's critical passages, their bolt weapons and heavy equipment providing concentrated firepower that inflicted significant casualties on Word-Bearer's assault teams. The Word-Bearer's approach to the fortress assault emphasized psychological warfare and corruption effects, their forces broadcasting blasphemous hymns and heretical prayers designed to break Imperial morale before actual combat began. These transmissions affected Imperial Guard personnel more severely than Space Marines, causing several units to suffer complete breakdown as their faith in the Emperor wavered under exposure to chaos corruption. The Word-Bearer's chaplains led the assault personally, their Crozius Arcanum and demon weapons proving effective against Space Marine defenders, whose spiritual training provided some protection against conventional chaos corruption, but could not completely shield them from concentrated exposure to warp energies. The fortress world of Fularis II became the target for Abaddon's first demonstration of coordinated Blackstone Fortress firepower, the planet's strategic importance as a major Imperial Navy supply depot, making it an ideal choice for showcasing the weapon's destructive capabilities. The world's orbital defenses included multiple weapon platforms and a substantial garrison of Imperial Guard regiments, forces that represented typical Imperial defensive arrangements throughout the Gothic Sector. The planet's industrial facilities produced ammunition and spare parts for Battlefleet Gothic, their output crucial for maintaining Imperial naval operations during extended campaigns. The assault on Fularis II began with the emergence of 3 Blackstone fortresses in the system's outer reaches, their massive forms creating gravitational disturbances that disrupted normal space traffic and interfered with Imperial communication networks. The fortresses moved into position with deliberate precision, their alien propulsion systems allowing them to achieve optimal firing positions while maintaining formation integrity. Imperial defenders initially assumed they faced another conventional Chaos Fleet assault, their tactical preparations focusing on repelling boarding actions and surviving sustained bombardment rather than dealing with weapons capable of planetary annihilation. Lord Admiral Ravensburg received fragmentary reports about the Blackstone Fortress's activation from surviving Imperial personnel who had witnessed the structure's awakening, but the scale of the threat remained unclear until tactical analysis revealed the true nature of the weapons now under Chaos control. The Admiral's staff worked frantically to develop countermeasures for dealing with mobile weapons platforms that could engage targets from beyond the range of conventional Imperial weapons, their efforts hampered by lack of detailed information about the fortress's capabilities and limitations. Imperial intelligence networks had provided extensive data about Chaos Fleet compositions and typical tactical approaches, but nothing in their archives prepared them for dealing with archaeotech weapons that predated human civilization. The coordinated firing sequence that destroyed Fularis II demonstrated the terrifying effectiveness of multiple Blackstone fortresses operating as a unified weapon system, Their combined energy output focused on the planet's surface through targeting systems that could maintain precision across interplanetary distances. The initial bombardment targeted the world's orbital defense platforms, their concentrated fire reducing the massive installations to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal debris. The fortress's weapon systems operated with supernatural accuracy. Their demon-possessed targeting spirits capable of predicting defensive movements and adjusting firing solutions in real time to maintain optimal effectiveness. The planet's surface bombardment began with precision strikes against major population centers and industrial installations, the Blackstone Fortresses' energy beams carving glowing furrows across continents, while secondary explosions created mushroom clouds that rose into the upper atmosphere. The weapon's power output exceeded anything in Imperial arsenals by several orders of magnitude, their energy discharges creating localized gravitational distortions that affected the planet's rotational stability. Imperial observers aboard distant monitoring stations recorded seismic readings that indicated planetary crust fractures extending to the mantle-level geological damage that would have required sustained bombardment by entire Imperial fleet formations using conventional weapons. The final phase of Fularis II's destruction involved concentrated fire from all three Blackstone fortresses simultaneously, their combined energy output creating a focused beam that penetrated completely through the planet's core and emerged from the opposite hemisphere. The planet's structural integrity collapsed within minutes of this assault, its mass fragmenting into asteroid-sized chunks that created a new debris field where a thriving Imperial world had existed only hours before. The destruction scale exceeded even Abaddon's expectations. The Blackstone Fortresses combined firepower proving capable of achievements that approached the legendary weapons of the war in Heaven period. Imperial response to the Fularis II annihilation involved desperate attempts to develop countermeasures for dealing with weapons that operated beyond the range and capability of conventional Imperial military forces. Lord Admiral Ravensburg authorized the development of specialized boarding torpedoes equipped with virus bombs and melta charges, weapons designed to penetrate the Blackstone Fortress's hull and disable their control systems through internal sabotage. These weapons represented adaptations of existing Imperial technology rather than completely new developments, their effectiveness depending on the ability of Imperial forces to approach the fortresses closely enough to launch successful boarding operations. The Imperial Navy's tactical doctrine required complete revision to address the threat posed by mobile weapons platforms that could engage Imperial fleets from beyond effective return fire range, forcing fleet commanders to develop new approaches to void warfare that emphasized speed and stealth over traditional formation fighting. Fast attack craft and torpedo bombers received priority deployment for operations against the Blackstone fortresses, their superior maneuverability potentially allowing them to close to effective range while avoiding the massive energy weapons that could eliminate capital ships with single shots. These tactical adaptations represented fundamental changes to Imperial naval doctrine, their implementation requiring extensive retraining and equipment modifications throughout Battlefleet Gothic. Space Marine chapters throughout the Gothic sector began developing specialized assault techniques designed specifically for operations against the Blackstone fortresses, their tactical expertise in boarding actions providing the foundation for new approaches to attacking heavily defended archaeotech installations. The Imperial Fist's knowledge of siege warfare proved particularly valuable during these planning sessions, their understanding of fortification design allowing them to identify potential weak points in the fortress's defensive arrangements. The chapter's Techmarines worked closely with Adeptus Mechanicus specialists to develop equipment modifications that could enhance Space Marine effectiveness during operations in the fortress's alien environments. The psychological impact of witnessing entire worlds destroyed by weapons that predated humanity created morale problems throughout Imperial forces that extended beyond immediate tactical considerations, as personnel struggled to comprehend the true scale of the threat they faced. Reports of Fularis II's annihilation spread through Imperial communication networks despite attempts at censorship, creating panic among civilian populations and undermining confidence in the Imperium's ability to protect its citizens from chaos aggression. Imperial Guard regiments reported increased incidents of desertion and breakdown among troops who had learned about the planet's destruction, their training and indoctrination proving insufficient preparation for dealing with weapons that could eliminate entire worlds within hours. The Adeptus Mechanicus response to the Blackstone Fortress threat involved mobilizing every available tech priest with expertise in archaeotech research. Their efforts focused on developing technical countermeasures that could neutralize or disable the ancient weapons through technological rather than military means. Forge worlds throughout the Segmentum Obscurus received priority orders to manufacture specialized equipment designed for operations against the fortresses, including enhanced auger arrays that could penetrate the structure's alien shielding and modified servo skulls capable of conducting reconnaissance missions within their interior passages. These technical solutions represented the Imperium's best hope for developing effective countermeasures against weapons that exceeded conventional military capabilities. The strategic momentum that had favored Abaddon's forces throughout the opening phases of the 12th Black Crusade began to shift as Imperial commanders adapted their tactics to counter the unprecedented threat posed by the Blackstone Fortresses. Lord Admiral Ravensburg's methodical approach to fleet coordination started yielding results as scattered Imperial squadrons consolidated into larger battle groups capable of engaging Chaos forces on more equal terms. The Admiral's decision to abandon traditional patrol patterns in favor of concentrated strike forces allowed Imperial vessels to achieve local superiority in specific engagements, even as the overall strategic situation remained precarious throughout the Gothic sector. The first significant Imperial victory occurred when Captain Leoton Semper's cruiser Dauntless intercepted a squadron of word-bearers vessels attempting to establish a supply depot in the outer reaches of the Lysade system. The Chaos ships had become separated from their main fleet during warp translation, their navigators struggling with the increasingly unstable Empyrean currents that plagued the region as more demon engines operated within real space. Semper's tactical approach involved using asteroid fields to mask his vessel's approach, allowing the Dauntless to achieve optimal firing position before the enemy squadron detected Imperial presence. The engagement demonstrated the effectiveness of Imperial long-range gunnery when properly coordinated, as the Dauntless's lance batteries achieved direct hits on two word-bearers cruisers before they could bring their own weapons to bear effectively. The Imperial vessel's crew had trained extensively in precision firing techniques, their gun crews capable of maintaining accuracy even while maneuvering through asteroid debris that would have challenged less experienced personnel. Captain Semper's tactical innovations included the use of proximity-fused shells that could detonate near enemy vessels without requiring direct impact, their explosive force sufficient to damage weapon systems and sensor arrays even when enemy void shields remained functional. The word-bearers' response involved attempting to close to boarding range, where their Chaos Space Marine assault troops could exploit their advantages in close combat, but the Dauntless maintained optimal distance through superior engine performance and navigation skills. The Imperial crew's familiarity with local space conditions allowed them to utilize gravitational anomalies and debris fields that hindered enemy movement while providing cover for their own vessel's maneuvers. The engagement lasted 4 hours before the surviving word-bearers vessel withdrew toward the system edge, its hull breached in multiple locations and its weapon systems operating at reduced effectiveness. Intelligence gathered from the destroyed Chaos vessels revealed valuable information about enemy supply lines and operational procedures, data that Imperial commanders used to plan subsequent interdiction operations throughout the Gothic sector. The word-bearers had been carrying technical equipment intended for establishing demon forges and corrupted manufacturing facilities, their cargo manifests providing insights into chaos construction priorities and resource requirements. This intelligence enabled Imperial forces to identify and target similar supply convoys, disrupting enemy efforts to establish permanent installations throughout captured systems. The arrival of reinforcements from neighboring sectors began to tip the numerical balance in favor of Imperial forces, though these additional vessels required time to integrate into existing command structures and adapt to local tactical conditions. Battlefleet Bacca dispatched a battle group consisting of the battleship Triumph of Bacca and 6 escort vessels, their crews possessing extensive experience fighting Chaos Raiders along the Maelstrom's borders. The reinforcing vessels brought additional firepower and specialized equipment that enhanced Imperial capabilities, including experimental torpedo designs and enhanced communication systems that could maintain contact despite chaos jamming efforts. The integration of reinforcement fleets created coordination challenges that Imperial commanders addressed through intensive joint training exercises and standardized communication protocols. Admiral Constantine Mordian worked closely with the arriving battle group commanders to establish unified tactical doctrines that maximize the effectiveness of combined operations while minimizing confusion during actual combat engagements. These efforts involved adapting successful tactics developed by individual squadrons for use by larger fleet formations, creating standardized procedures that could be implemented across multiple battle groups simultaneously. Battlefleet Obscurus contributed additional cruiser squadrons and specialist vessels that brought unique capabilities to Imperial operations throughout the Gothic sector. The battle barge Eternal Vigilance arrived with a full company of Imperial Fist Space Marines, their expertise in defensive warfare proving valuable for operations against chaos-held installations and captured Imperial facilities. The Space Marines' tactical doctrine emphasized systematic assault techniques that could breach heavily fortified positions while minimizing casualties among Imperial forces, their experience gained through centuries of siege warfare operations throughout the Segmentum Obscurus. The gradual buildup of Imperial naval superiority in contested systems reflected careful strategic planning that prioritized sustainable operations over dramatic tactical victories. Lord Admiral Ravensburg's deployment orders emphasized maintaining adequate reserves while concentrating sufficient firepower to achieve decisive results in individual engagements. This approach required extensive logistical coordination to ensure that Imperial vessels remained supplied with ammunition and spare parts during extended operations, their effectiveness depending on maintaining operational readiness across multiple star systems simultaneously. Imperial success in recapturing the Quinrock Sound demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated fleet actions when properly executed against isolated chaos forces. The system had fallen to Iron Warriors' assault forces 3 weeks earlier, but their garrison consisted primarily of cultist auxiliaries and renegade Imperial Guard units rather than full Chaos Space Marine formations. Captain Helena Voss led the Liberation Fleet aboard her strike cruiser Righteous Anger, her force consisting of 4 cruisers and 12 escort vessels that had been specifically selected for rapid assault operations. The liberation operation began with precision strikes against the system's communication infrastructure, Imperial forces using the same tactics that Chaos Raiders had employed during their initial assault. Fast attack craft and torpedo bombers targeted orbital relay stations and ground-based transmission facilities, severing contact between different enemy installations and preventing coordinated resistance efforts. The Imperial Assault Force maintained strict communication discipline during these preliminary operations, their success depending on achieving complete surprise before enemy forces could organize effective countermeasures. The main assault phase involved simultaneous attacks on multiple enemy positions throughout the system, Imperial battle groups coordinating their movements to prevent Chaos forces from concentrating their defenses at any single location. Captain Voss's tactical plan required precise timing and coordination between different Imperial squadrons, their success depending on maintaining synchronized operations despite the communication difficulties created by enemy jamming systems and natural interference from the system's electromagnetic phenomena. Iron Warriors' defensive positions throughout the Quinrock Sound had been constructed according to siege warfare principles that emphasized overlapping fields of fire and mutual support between different installations. However, their garrison forces lacked the numbers and equipment necessary to fully utilize these defensive advantages, their positions undermanned due to the Iron Warriors' commitment of their best troops to ongoing operations against other Imperial targets. The cultist auxiliaries defending most positions possessed basic military training, but lacked the discipline and experience necessary for effective coordination during sustained combat operations. Imperial boarding actions against captured orbital platforms demonstrated the effectiveness of Space Marine assault techniques when properly supported by naval gunfire and coordinated tactical planning. The Imperial Fist's boarding parties used specialized equipment designed for operations in void conditions. Their power armor modifications, including enhanced life support systems and magnetic clamps that allowed movement across enemy hull surfaces during combat. The Space Marines' assault doctrine emphasized rapid penetration of enemy defensive perimeters, followed by systematic clearance of internal passages and critical facilities. The recapture of Platform Tertius required 6 hours of continuous fighting as Imperial forces worked to eliminate Iron Warriors' positions throughout the facility's maze of corridors and defensive strongpoints. The platform's interior had been modified with additional barriers and weapon emplacements that channeled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones, but Imperial assault teams used breaching charges and melta weapons to create alternate routes that bypassed these defensive arrangements. The Space Marines' tactical flexibility allowed them to adapt their assault techniques to counter enemy defensive preparations, their experience in siege warfare providing the expertise necessary for overcoming fortified positions. The successful recapture of Blackstone Fortress Gamma represented the first major Imperial victory in the campaign to deny these ancient weapons to Chaos forces. The fortress had been captured by Night Lord's terror fleets 2 weeks earlier, but their occupation force had focused on establishing psychological control over Imperial prisoners rather than properly securing the structure's critical systems. The Night Lord's tactical doctrine emphasized terror and intimidation over conventional military objectives, their approach creating vulnerabilities that Imperial forces could exploit during liberation operations. Admiral Mordian's assault plan involved using the system's natural phenomena to mask Imperial fleet movements, his vessels approaching the fortress through asteroid fields and electromagnetic storms that interfered with enemy sensor systems. The assault force included specialized boarding craft equipped with enhanced shielding and navigation systems that could operate effectively in the hazardous conditions surrounding the fortress. These vessels carried Imperial Guard stormtrooper units trained specifically for operations against Chaos-held Archaeotech installations, their equipment including virus bombs and melta charges designed to disable ancient control systems. The liberation operation began with coordinated strikes against Night Lord's vessels, guarding the fortress Imperial Lance batteries, achieving surprise attacks that disabled 2 enemy cruisers before they could respond effectively. The remaining Chaos ships attempted to withdraw toward the system edge, but Imperial fast attack craft pursued and engaged them with torpedo salvos that prevented organized retreat. The Night Lord's tactical doctrine proved less effective against determined Imperial assault forces, their psychological warfare techniques having minimal impact on Space Marine boarding parties, whose training included extensive conditioning against fear and intimidation. The fortress's internal clearance operations revealed the extent of Night Lord's corruption efforts, their occupation having transformed entire sections into torture chambers and execution sites designed to break Imperial prisoners through systematic brutality. Imperial assault teams discovered hundreds of captured Imperial Navy personnel and Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests who had been subjected to elaborate torture procedures, their treatment providing intelligence about Night Lord's interrogation techniques and information extraction methods. The The liberation of these prisoners yielded valuable intelligence about chaos operations throughout the Gothic sector, including details about enemy fleet movements and strategic objectives. The growing strain on chaos forces became evident as extended campaigning in real space began taking its toll on demon engines and possessed vessels throughout Abaddon's armada. These supernatural constructs required constant exposure to warp energies to maintain their effectiveness, their performance degrading when operating in normal space for extended periods. Several demon ships had begun experiencing system failures and reduced combat effectiveness, their supernatural components losing coherence as they remained cut off from the Empyrean currents that sustained their existence. The Tormentor-class demon ship Screaming Void suffered complete propulsion failure during an engagement with Imperial forces near the Mordian system, its warp-based engines unable to maintain function after 3 weeks of continuous operations in real space. The vessel's demon-possessed machine spirit had begun manifesting signs of spiritual exhaustion, its supernatural abilities diminishing as the entity struggled to maintain coherence without regular contact with warp space. The ship's crew attempted to perform emergency rituals designed to restore their vessel's capabilities, but these efforts proved insufficient to overcome the fundamental limitations of demon engine technology. Possessed Imperial vessels throughout the Chaos Fleet experienced similar degradation as their demon inhabitants struggled with the constraints of extended real space operations. The battleship Eternal Damnation had lost approximately 30% of its combat effectiveness due to system failures caused by its possessing entities' declining spiritual coherence. The demon's precognitive abilities had become unreliable, its predictions about enemy movements proving increasingly inaccurate as its connection to warp space weakened through prolonged exposure to normal physical laws. Wordbearer's tech priests attempted to address these supernatural maintenance issues through increasingly elaborate ritual procedures, their efforts involving blood sacrifice and psychic manipulation, designed to strengthen the connection between demon entities and their physical hosts. These rituals required significant resources and personnel, diverting chaos forces from combat operations while providing only temporary improvements to affected vessels. The tech priest's knowledge of demon binding techniques proved insufficient for addressing the fundamental incompatibility between supernatural entities and extended operations in normal space-time. Iron Warrior's vessels experienced different but equally serious problems as their siege equipment began showing signs of wear and damage that exceeded their repair capabilities. The Legion's heavy weapons and specialized boarding equipment required constant maintenance using resources that were becoming increasingly scarce as Imperial interdiction efforts disrupted chaos supply lines. Several Iron Warriors cruisers had been forced to reduce their combat effectiveness due to weapon system failures and armor damage that could not be properly repaired without access to major shipyard facilities. The Iron Warriors' response to these maintenance challenges involved cannibalizing damaged vessels to provide spare parts and raw materials for their remaining operational ships. This approach maintained the combat effectiveness of their core fleet elements while gradually reducing their overall numerical strength, creating a strategic situation that favored Imperial forces capable of maintaining their vessels through established supply networks. The Iron Warriors' expertise in improvised repairs and battlefield maintenance provided some advantages, but their efforts could not completely overcome the logistical challenges of extended operations far from friendly territory. Renegade pirate fleets that had joined Abaddon's crusade began experiencing morale problems as the campaign's duration exceeded their expectations and casualties mounted during increasingly difficult engagements with Imperial forces. Many pirate captains had expected quick victories and easy plunder, their participation motivated by promises of wealth and opportunity rather than ideological commitment to chaos. The reality of sustained military operations against determined Imperial resistance created disillusionment among crews who lacked the fanatical dedication of Chaos Space Marines and cultist auxiliaries. Captain Vox Caradron's pirate fleet suffered significant losses during a failed raid against Imperial supply convoys in the Stranavar system, his vessels encountering heavier escort forces than intelligence reports had indicated. The engagement resulted in the destruction of 3 pirate cruisers and severe damage to Caradhran's flagship Bloody Revenge, losses that represented nearly half of his operational strength. The pirate captain's tactical assessment concluded that continued participation in the crusade would likely result in the complete destruction of his remaining forces, creating pressure for withdrawal that conflicted with his obligations to Abaddon's overall strategic plan. Alpha Legion vessels throughout the Chaos Fleet maintained their operational effectiveness better than other elements due to their specialized equipment and superior maintenance procedures, but even these elite forces experienced difficulties maintaining their complex deception capabilities during extended operations. The Legion's false identification systems and communication intercept equipment required regular updates and calibration to remain effective against Imperial countermeasures, their effectiveness declining as Imperial intelligence services adapted to Alpha Legion tactics and developed new security procedures. The Alpha Legion's response involved increasing their reliance on conventional military tactics rather than the elaborate deception operations that normally characterized their approach to warfare. This tactical shift reduced their unique advantages while forcing them to compete directly with Imperial forces in areas where the Imperium possessed superior numbers and resources. Several Alpha Legion vessels had been forced to abandon covert operations and join conventional fleet engagements, their specialized capabilities wasted in direct combat roles that could have been filled by standard Chaos warships. The cumulative effect of these various degradation factors began to shift the overall balance of the campaign, as Chaos forces found themselves increasingly unable to maintain the operational tempo that had characterized their initial successes. Abaddon's strategic timetable required rapid capture of all 6 Blackstone Fortresses before Imperial reinforcements could arrive in sufficient numbers to contest Chaos control of these ancient weapons. The growing maintenance and morale problems throughout his fleet created delays and reduced effectiveness that threatened to disrupt this carefully planned schedule. Imperial intelligence services recognized these emerging weaknesses in Chaos operations and began developing tactical approaches designed to exploit enemy vulnerabilities while maximizing Imperial advantages in logistics and sustained operations. Lord Admiral Ravensburg's strategic planning emphasized maintaining pressure on Chaos forces through continuous engagement and interdiction operations, preventing enemy fleets from withdrawing to safe areas where they could conduct necessary maintenance and resupply operations. This approach required careful coordination between multiple Imperial battle groups, their operations designed to maintain contact with enemy forces while avoiding decisive engagements that could result in catastrophic Imperial losses. The strategic situation throughout the Gothic sector had deteriorated beyond Abaddon's most pessimistic projections, as Imperial resistance proved far more resilient than anticipated. The Warmaster's carefully orchestrated timetable for capturing all 6 Blackstone Fortresses had fallen behind schedule due to unexpected Imperial tactical adaptations and the growing maintenance crisis affecting his supernatural vessels. From his command throne aboard the planet Killer, Abaddon studied tactical displays showing the current disposition of his forces across multiple star systems, the hololithic projections revealing gaps in his battle lines, where demon engines had succumbed to real space degradation and renegade elements had withdrawn from active operations. The loss of Blackstone Fortress Gamma to Imperial recapture operations represented more than a tactical setback. It demonstrated that his enemies possessed both the capability and determination to contest Chaos control of these ancient weapons through sustained military action. Intelligence reports from surviving Night Lord's personnel described Imperial assault techniques that had evolved specifically to counter Chaos defensive arrangements, their boarding parties equipped with specialized equipment and tactics that neutralized traditional terror warfare advantages. The fortress's recapture had also cost him valuable technical personnel, including several corrupted tech priests whose knowledge of the ancient control systems would be difficult to replace. The deteriorating condition of his demon engines created additional pressure for decisive action before these supernatural assets became completely inoperative. The Screaming Void had been forced to withdraw from active operations entirely, its warp-based propulsion systems failing during what should have been a routine patrol mission near the Lysaid system. Similar failures affected nearly 20% of his demon ship contingent, their supernatural components losing coherence as extended real space operations drained the warp energies that sustained their existence. Wordbearer's tech priests had attempted increasingly desperate rituals to restore these vessels, but their efforts yielded only temporary improvements while consuming resources needed for other critical operations. Abaddon's assessment of the strategic situation revealed that his forces retained control of 3 Blackstone Fortresses, with 2 additional structures still contested and 1 firmly in Imperial hands. The captured fortresses had demonstrated their incredible destructive potential during the annihilation of Fularis II, but their true strategic value lay in their ability to operate as a coordinated network capable of reshaping entire sectors according to his will. The technical challenges involved in linking multiple fortresses remained formidable, requiring expertise that exceeded even his most knowledgeable corrupted tech priests and demon-possessed cogitators. The Warmaster's strategic planning had always recognized that the 12th Black Crusade represented his best opportunity to achieve decisive victory against the Imperium, as the political instability following the recent Macharian Crusade had left many Imperial sectors undermanned and poorly coordinated. The Gothic sector's position near the Eye of Terror made it an ideal testing ground for his evolved tactical doctrine, while the presence of the Blackstone Fortresses offered the potential for acquiring weapons that could break Imperial resistance throughout the galaxy. However, the campaign's extended duration had allowed Imperial forces to adapt and respond more effectively than his intelligence networks had predicted. The decision to commit his remaining reserves in a final concentrated assault represented a calculated gamble that would determine the Crusade's ultimate outcome. Abaddon ordered the withdrawal of Chaos forces from secondary objectives throughout the Gothic sector, concentrating his available strength for coordinated strikes against the 3 remaining Blackstone fortresses still under Imperial control. This strategic redeployment involved abandoning captured installations and supply depots that had required significant resources to establish, but the Warmaster understood that controlling additional fortresses would provide far greater strategic value than maintaining scattered territorial gains. The Planet Killer began moving toward the heart of the Gothic sector, its massive bulk accompanied by the surviving elements of his core battle fleet. The flagship's approach created gravitational disturbances that affected navigation throughout multiple star systems, while its weapon systems remained powered and ready for the decisive engagement that would determine whether the ancient weapons fell permanently under Chaos control. The vessel's command center buzzed with activity as tactical officers coordinated the movements of dozens of capital ships and hundreds of escort vessels, their efforts focused on achieving optimal positioning for the coming assault. Iron Warrior's forces received orders to abandon their siege operations against secondary targets and concentrate on capturing Blackstone Fortress Delta in the Mordian system. Warsmith Hansu's tactical assessment indicated that Imperial defenses around this fortress had been reinforced following the successful recapture of Fortress Gamma, but intelligence reports suggested that the garrison still consisted primarily of Imperial Guard units rather than Space Marine formations. The Iron Warriors' expertise in siege warfare made them the ideal choice for this assault, their heavy weapons and specialized equipment designed specifically for breaching heavily fortified positions. Wordbearers' fleets moved to assault Blackstone Fortress Epsilon, their cathedral ships broadcasting corrupted hymns and blasphemous prayers designed to weaken Imperial morale before the actual attack began. The fortress's location in the Bane Moor system placed it near critical Imperial communication facilities, making its capture essential for disrupting enemy coordination during the final phase of the campaign. The Word-Bearers' approach emphasized psychological warfare and corruption effects, their tactics designed to turn Imperial defenders against each other through exposure to chaos influence. Night Lord's terror fleets concentrated their remaining operational vessels for a renewed assault on Blackstone Fortress Zeta, their previous failure to hold Fortress Gamma having damaged the Legion's reputation within Abaddon's hierarchy. The Night Lord's tactical doctrine required adaptation to counter Imperial countermeasures that had proven effective during the fortress recapture operations, their traditional terror tactics proving less effective against Space Marine defenders, whose training included extensive conditioning against fear and intimidation. The Legion's commanders developed new approaches that emphasized rapid assault and systematic elimination of Imperial command personnel rather than prolonged psychological warfare. The coordination of these simultaneous assaults required unprecedented cooperation between different Chaos factions, their traditional rivalries and competing objectives temporarily set aside in service of Abaddon's strategic vision. The War Master's personal authority and demonstrated success in previous phases of the campaign provided the foundation for this unity, though tensions remained between different Legion elements who viewed each other with suspicion and contempt. Regular communication between assault force commanders helped maintain coordination, but the distances involved and Imperial jamming efforts created significant challenges for maintaining unified tactical control. Imperial intelligence services detected the massive redeployment of Chaos forces throughout the Gothic Sector, their sensor networks tracking the movement of dozens of capital ships as enemy fleets abandoned secondary positions and concentrated around the remaining Blackstone Fortresses. Lord Admiral Ravensburg's tactical assessment recognized that Abaddon was committing his remaining reserves for a decisive engagement, creating both opportunities and risks for Imperial defensive operations. The concentration of Chaos forces made them vulnerable to coordinated Imperial counterattacks, but their combined firepower represented a threat that could overwhelm individual Imperial battle groups if they achieved tactical surprise. The Admiral's response involved mobilizing every available Imperial vessel throughout the Gothic sector, including merchant ships and civilian transports that could be pressed into service as auxiliary vessels. The emergency mobilization orders activated reserve squadrons and recalled patrol vessels from throughout the region, their crews receiving priority deployment to the systems containing the threatened Blackstone Fortresses. This massive redeployment created logistical challenges that strained Imperial supply networks, but the strategic importance of preventing additional fortress captures justified the extraordinary resource commitment. Battlefleet Gothic's remaining capital ships received assignments based on their specific capabilities and crew experience, with veteran formations deployed to the most critical defensive positions, while newer vessels provided support and reserve functions. The battleship Dominus Astra led the defense of Blackstone Fortress Delta, her powerful weapon systems and experienced crew providing the backbone for Imperial resistance in the Mordian system. The vessel's lance batteries had been recalibrated for engaging targets at maximum range, their enhanced targeting systems designed to achieve first-shot kills against approaching Chaos vessels. Space Marine chapters throughout the Gothic sector committed their available forces to the fortress defense operations, their expertise in boarding actions and close combat providing essential capabilities for repelling Chaos assault attempts. The Imperial Fists deployed 2 full companies to reinforce the garrison of Blackstone Fortress Epsilon, their knowledge of siege warfare proving invaluable for establishing defensive positions within the ancient structure's alien architecture. The chapter's Tech Marines worked closely with Adeptus Mechanicus specialists to activate additional defensive systems and establish fallback positions that could be held even if outer defensive perimeters were breached. The Crimson Fists contributed their remaining operational strength to the defense of Blackstone Fortress Zeta, their battle barge Crimson Fist providing mobile fire support for the fortress's defensive installations. The chapter's tactical doctrine emphasized coordinated defensive operations that maximized the effectiveness of limited personnel through superior positioning and fire control. Their defensive preparations included establishing overlapping fields of fire and creating choke points that would force attacking Chaos forces into predetermined kill zones where Imperial weapons could achieve maximum effectiveness. Adeptus Mechanicus forge worlds throughout the sector accelerated their production of specialized equipment designed for operations against the Blackstone Fortresses, their manufactorums working around the clock to produce enhanced auger arrays, modified servo skulls, and experimental weapon systems. The tech priests' research into the fortress's alien technology had yielded insights that could be applied to defensive operations, including techniques for disrupting the structure's control systems and preventing unauthorized activation of their weapon systems. These technical solutions represented the Imperium's best hope for neutralizing the fortresses if their capture by Chaos forces became inevitable. The experimental equipment included virus bombs specifically designed to target the crystalline matrices that served as the fortress's primary control interfaces, their payloads engineered to disrupt the quantum resonance patterns that allowed the ancient systems to function. Tech priests had developed these weapons through careful analysis of captured Chaos technical data and observation of the fortress's operational characteristics during previous engagements. The virus bombs represented a last resort option that would render the fortresses permanently inoperative, but their use would also eliminate any possibility of future Imperial research into the ancient technologies. Eldar forces throughout the Gothic sector intensified their intervention efforts as their Farseer's visions revealed the catastrophic consequences that would result from Abaddon's success in capturing additional Blackstone fortresses. Craftworld Ulthwi deployed additional aspect warrior shrines to support their existing war host, their forces conducting surgical strikes against critical Chaos installations and personnel. The Eldar's knowledge of the fortress's true capabilities made them valuable allies for Imperial forces, though their secretive nature and refusal to share detailed technical information continued to frustrate human commanders who desperately needed intelligence about the ancient weapons. Farseer Eldred Ulthrin's prophecies described potential futures where the united Blackstone fortresses served as focusing arrays for rituals that could tear permanent rifts between real space and the warp, allowing demon armies to pour into normal space without the usual limitations imposed by physical laws. The Farseer's visions showed entire sectors transformed into demon worlds where reality itself obeyed the whims of Chaos entities, their populations either consumed by supernatural predators or transformed into mindless cultist hordes. These prophetic images provided additional motivation for Eldar intervention, as the consequences of failure would affect their race as severely as humanity. The Eldar response included attempts to sabotage the control systems of Chaos-held Blackstone fortresses, their infiltration specialists using advanced technology to introduce subtle flaws that would prevent proper coordination between multiple structures. These sabotage operations required precise timing and coordination with Imperial defensive efforts, as the Eldar needed to avoid detection by both Chaos forces and Imperial defenders while working within the fortress's alien architecture. The success of these operations would depend on the Eldar's ability to access critical systems without triggering defensive protocols that could alert enemy forces to their presence. The massive fleet engagement that erupted as Chaos forces closed on their targets represented the largest void battle in the Gothic sector since the Great Crusade, with hundreds of capital ships and thousands of escort vessels maneuvering across multiple star systems simultaneously. The planet killer's approach toward Blackstone Fortress Delta created gravitational disturbances that affected the movements of smaller vessels throughout the Mordian system, while its massive weapon systems began charging for the bombardment that would precede the main assault. The flagship's energy readings registered levels that approached those of stellar phenomena, their power output creating electromagnetic interference that disrupted communication networks throughout the surrounding region. Imperial defensive formations attempted to maintain coordination despite the communication difficulties created by Chaos jamming systems, and the natural interference generated by so many active weapon systems operating in close proximity. Lord Admiral Ravensburg's tactical doctrine emphasized maintaining formation integrity while concentrating firepower on individual enemy vessels, but the sheer scale of the engagement made detailed tactical control nearly impossible. Individual squadron commanders were forced to make independent decisions based on local conditions, their training and experience providing the foundation for coordinated resistance despite the breakdown of centralized command authority. The opening salvos of the engagement demonstrated the devastating firepower that modern void warfare could unleash when capital ships engaged at close range, with individual weapon strikes releasing energies equivalent to strategic nuclear weapons. Imperial lance batteries carved glowing furrows across Chaos vessel hulls, while macro cannon shells the size of HAB blocks created massive explosions that could be observed from planetary surfaces. The void between opposing fleets filled with expanding clouds of superheated plasma and metallic debris as armor plating vaporized under the intense energy discharges. Iron Warriors vessels demonstrated their siege warfare expertise by targeting specific Imperial defensive installations rather than attempting to achieve quick kills through overwhelming firepower, their gunners focusing on weapon systems and command facilities that coordinated Imperial resistance efforts. The battle barge Iron Blood led these precision strikes, her enhanced targeting systems allowing accurate fire despite the electromagnetic interference that plagued the engagement zone. The Iron Warriors' methodical approach gradually degraded Imperial defensive capabilities while preserving their own strength for the boarding operations that would determine control of the Blackstone Fortress. Word-bearers' cathedral ships broadcast their corrupted hymns and blasphemous prayers across all communication frequencies, their transmissions causing madness and despair among Imperial crew members who heard the unholy words. The psychological warfare effects proved particularly devastating to Imperial Guard personnel serving aboard orbital defense platforms, several units suffering complete breakdown as their faith in the Emperor wavered under sustained exposure to chaos corruption. The word-bearers' approach emphasized breaking Imperial morale before actual combat began, their tactics designed to reduce enemy resistance through spiritual rather than physical assault. The climactic engagement around Blackstone Fortress Delta saw the Planet Killer unleash its primary weapon against Imperial defensive positions, the massive energy discharge creating a lance of destruction that extended across interplanetary distances. The weapon's focusing array drew power from bound demons imprisoned within the ship's hull, their agonized screams providing the psychic resonance necessary to channel such devastating energies. The planet-killing cannon's impact vaporized 3 Imperial cruisers instantly, while creating secondary explosions that damaged additional vessels throughout the defensive formation. The aftermath of the 12th Black Crusade's conclusion left the Gothic Sector fundamentally transformed, its strategic landscape reshaped by the unprecedented scale of destruction and the hard-won lessons learned during 6 years of brutal void warfare. The final engagement around Blackstone Fortress Delta had ended with Abaddon's withdrawal after sustaining catastrophic losses, including the crippling of the Planet Killer itself when coordinated Imperial lance strikes penetrated its primary weapon housing and caused a cascade failure that left the massive vessel barely operational. The War Master's retreat marked not defeat but strategic repositioning, his forces having successfully captured and destroyed several of the ancient fortresses, while gathering invaluable intelligence about their capabilities and construction. The reconstruction efforts that began immediately following the cessation of major combat operations represented the largest Imperial undertaking in the Gothic Sector since its initial colonization during the Great Crusade. Lord Admiral Ravensburg coordinated these efforts from his new headquarters on the rebuilt orbital platform above Stranavar, the facility incorporating lessons learned from the war's defensive engagements. The platform's enhanced armor incorporated layered void shield generators and redundant power systems that could maintain defensive capabilities even after sustaining severe battle damage. Its weapon systems featured improved targeting cogitators and enhanced ammunition storage facilities that addressed the supply shortages that had plagued Imperial forces during extended engagements. The shipyards of Skindlegeist underwent complete reconstruction using advanced techniques developed during the conflict, their new construction incorporating defensive features that transformed them from purely industrial facilities into fortified installations capable of withstanding direct assault. The yard's modular design allowed rapid reconfiguration between civilian shipbuilding and military vessel construction, while underground facilities provided secure storage for critical components and raw materials. The reconstruction project employed tens of thousands of workers from throughout the Segmentum Obscurus, their efforts coordinated by Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests who had gained extensive experience in rapid construction techniques during the war's emergency fortification programs. The fortress worlds throughout the sector received comprehensive upgrades that reflected tactical innovations developed during the conflict's most intense phases. Cadia Minor's surface installations were expanded with additional lance batteries, positioned to provide overlapping coverage of all orbital approach routes, while its underground command bunkers incorporated enhanced communication systems that could maintain contact with Imperial forces even during intensive enemy jamming operations. The planet's garrison was reinforced with veteran Imperial Guard regiments, whose combat experience included direct engagement with Chaos Space Marines and Demon engines, their training programs updated to address the specific tactical challenges posed by supernatural enemies. The strengthening of defensive positions extended beyond simple reconstruction to include fundamental changes in Imperial military doctrine throughout the Gothic sector. The establishment of rapid response fleets stationed at strategic locations allowed Imperial forces to concentrate overwhelming firepower against enemy incursions before they could establish permanent footholds. These mobile battle groups incorporated lessons learned about void warfare against chaos forces, their vessel compositions optimized for engaging enemies who employed supernatural abilities and unconventional tactics. The fleets maintained constant readiness through rotating patrol schedules that ensured fresh crews and properly maintained equipment remained available for immediate deployment. The Imperial Navy's tactical evolution following the Gothic War represented one of the most significant doctrinal changes in void warfare since the Great Crusade. The experiences gained fighting Abaddon's technologically diverse fleet had demonstrated the inadequacy of traditional Imperial naval tactics when facing enemies who possessed archaeotech weapons and demon-enhanced capabilities. Fleet commanders throughout the Imperium studied detailed after-action reports from Gothic Sector engagements, their analysis revealing fundamental flaws in conventional Imperial approaches to void combat that required systematic correction. The development of new fleet tactics emphasized flexibility and rapid adaptation over the rigid formation fighting that had characterized Imperial naval doctrine for millennia. Captain Leoton Semper's innovative use of asteroid fields and debris clouds for tactical concealment became standard procedure for Imperial reconnaissance squadrons, while his precision gunnery techniques were incorporated into training programs throughout Battlefleet Gothic. The Dauntless's successful engagements against superior Chaos forces demonstrated the effectiveness of superior crew training and tactical innovation over simple numerical superiority or firepower advantages. The lessons learned regarding archaeotech weapons fundamentally altered Imperial understanding of ancient technologies and their potential military applications. The Blackstone Fortresses' demonstrated capabilities during the conflict had revealed the existence of weapons that operated according to principles completely foreign to current Imperial knowledge, their power output exceeding anything in contemporary arsenals by several orders of magnitude. Adeptus Mechanicus research efforts intensified following the war's conclusion, with Forge worlds throughout the Segmentum Obscurus dedicating significant resources to studying captured Chaos technical data and analyzing the remains of destroyed archaeotech installations. The technical intelligence gathered during the conflict included detailed sensor readings of Blackstone Fortress weapon systems during their operational phases, data that provided unprecedented insights into the structure's energy generation and focusing mechanisms. Tech priests analyzing this information discovered that the fortresses incorporated quantum manipulation technologies that could alter fundamental physical constants within localized areas, allowing them to achieve energy densities that should have been impossible according to known physics. This knowledge led to experimental research programs aimed at developing Imperial weapons that could incorporate similar principles, though progress remained limited by the Omnissiah's prohibitions against innovation and the extreme complexity of the underlying technologies. The development of countermeasures against demon engines represented another crucial area of tactical evolution following the Gothic War. Imperial forces had encountered supernatural vessels whose capabilities defied conventional understanding of void warfare. Their ability to phase partially into warp space during combat operations, creating tactical challenges that existing Imperial doctrine could not address effectively. The solution involved developing specialized sensor arrays that could track demon engines through their warp signatures, while new weapon designs incorporated blessed ammunition and sanctified components that could damage supernatural targets more effectively than conventional ordnance. The Imperial Navy's void warfare training programs underwent comprehensive revision to address the specific challenges posed by chaos fleets employing mixed conventional and supernatural assets. Naval academies throughout the Imperium began teaching courses on demon engine identification and engagement tactics, while gunnery schools developed specialized training scenarios that simulated combat against enemies capable of supernatural maneuvers. These educational reforms ensured that future Imperial naval officers would possess the knowledge necessary to engage chaos forces effectively, their training incorporating hard-won experience from the Gothic War's most challenging engagements. The strategic implications of the conflict extended far beyond the Gothic sector's boundaries, as Imperial military planners recognized that Abaddon's tactical innovations and technological acquisitions during the 12th Black Crusade represented a fundamental escalation in the threat posed by chaos forces throughout the galaxy. The War Master's demonstrated ability to coordinate multiple traitor legions and renegade fleets in sustained operations indicated a level of strategic sophistication that exceeded previous chaos campaigns. His systematic approach to capturing archaeotech weapons suggested long-term planning that could threaten Imperial security across multiple sectors simultaneously. The effect on Abaddon standing among the Chaos Space Marine legions proved complex and multifaceted, as the 12th Black Crusade's mixed results created both admiration and criticism within the fractious hierarchy of the traitor forces. The War Master's successful capture and activation of multiple Blackstone Fortresses demonstrated his tactical evolution and strategic vision, earning respect from Legion commanders who had previously questioned his ability to achieve decisive victories against Imperial forces. The demonstration of coordinated firepower that destroyed Fularis II provided tangible proof of the ancient weapon's devastating potential, validating Abaddon's strategic focus on acquiring archaeotech assets rather than simply conducting traditional raiding operations. However, the ultimate failure to capture all 6 Blackstone fortresses and the heavy casualties sustained during the campaign's final phases created ammunition for critics within the traitor legions, who viewed the Crusade as another costly failure that had weakened Chaos forces without achieving decisive strategic gains. Iron Warriors commanders questioned the wisdom of committing so many resources to capturing weapons whose full potential remained unclear, while Night Lords captains criticized the prolonged nature of the campaign that had allowed Imperial forces time to adapt and develop effective countermeasures. These internal tensions reflected the perpetual challenge facing any Chaos leader attempting to unite the competing factions and personal ambitions that characterized traitor legion politics. The intelligence gathered during the Gothic War provided Abaddon with crucial insights into Imperial defensive capabilities and tactical doctrines that would prove invaluable during future Black Crusades. The detailed analysis of Imperial fleet compositions, command structures, and response procedures gave the War Master comprehensive understanding of enemy strengths and weaknesses that could be exploited in subsequent campaigns. The identification of key Imperial leaders and their tactical preferences allowed Chaos intelligence networks to develop targeted strategies for neutralizing or corrupting critical personnel during future operations. The technical knowledge acquired through the capture and study of Imperial installations provided Chaos forces with enhanced understanding of current Imperial military technology and manufacturing capabilities. Corrupted tech priests who had participated in the Gothic War brought back detailed information about Imperial shipyard procedures, weapon system specifications, and defensive installation designs that could be used to develop more effective assault techniques. This intelligence proved particularly valuable for planning infiltration operations and sabotage missions that could weaken Imperial defenses before actual military assaults began. The preparation for future Black Crusades incorporated lessons learned from the Gothic War's tactical challenges and strategic limitations. Abaddon recognized that the extended duration of real space operations had created significant strain on his demon engines and supernatural assets, requiring modifications to future campaign planning that would minimize these degradation effects. The development of mobile demon forges and corrupted shipyards during the Gothic War provided the foundation for establishing permanent Chaos manufacturing capabilities that could support extended operations without relying on supply lines stretching back to the Eye of Terror. The War Master's strategic planning for subsequent crusades emphasized the importance of achieving rapid, decisive victories before Imperial forces could adapt and coordinate effective countermeasures. The Gothic War had demonstrated that prolonged campaigns allowed Imperial commanders time to develop innovative tactics and concentrate superior forces, creating conditions that favored defenders over attackers. Future Chaos operations would need to achieve their objectives quickly while maintaining sufficient flexibility to exploit unexpected opportunities and respond to changing tactical conditions. The Imperial response to the strategic implications of the 12th Black Crusade involved comprehensive reforms of defensive planning and resource allocation throughout the territories bordering the Eye of Terror. The High Lords of Terra authorized the establishment of additional fortress worlds and naval bases along the Cadian Gate and surrounding systems, their construction incorporating defensive innovations developed during the Gothic War. These installations featured enhanced early warning systems and rapid response capabilities that could detect and intercept Chaos incursions before they could establish permanent footholds in Imperial territory. The creation of specialized anti-Chaos task forces represented another significant military reform implemented following the Gothic War's conclusion. These units combined Imperial Navy vessels with Space Marine Strike Forces and Adeptus Mechanicus technical specialists, their integrated command structures designed to provide rapid response capabilities against supernatural threats that exceeded the capabilities of conventional Imperial forces. The task forces maintained constant readiness through intensive training programs that simulated combat against demon engines, possessed vessels, and archaeotech weapons based on intelligence gathered during the Gothic War. The establishment of enhanced intelligence networks throughout the Eye of Terror frontier reflected recognition that early warning of Chaos military preparations could provide crucial advantages for Imperial defensive planning. These networks incorporated traditional spy networks with advanced sensor arrays and astropathic monitoring stations that could detect the massive warp disturbances typically associated with Black Crusade preparations. The intelligence gathered through these sources would allow Imperial forces to begin mobilization and reinforcement efforts before Chaos fleets emerged from warp space, potentially preventing the tactical surprise that had characterized the 12th Black Crusade's opening phases. The psychological impact of the Gothic War extended throughout Imperial society, as news of the conflict's scale and intensity reached populations across the segmentum obscurus despite official censorship efforts. The destruction of entire worlds by archaeotech weapons created unprecedented fear about the capabilities that Chaos forces might deploy in future conflicts, while reports of demon engines and possessed vessels challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of void warfare. Imperial propaganda efforts attempted to emphasize the ultimate Imperial victory and the heroism displayed by defending forces, but the conflict's duration and casualties made it impossible to completely suppress awareness of the threat's magnitude. The ecclesiarchy's response to the war's psychological effects involved intensified preaching campaigns that emphasized the emperor's protection and the ultimate triumph of imperial faith over chaos corruption. Cathedral worlds throughout the sector hosted massive prayer gatherings where millions of citizens participated in collective worship designed to strengthen spiritual defenses against future chaos incursions. These religious activities served both spiritual and practical purposes, as the enhanced faith generated by mass worship created psychic barriers that could interfere with chaos corruption efforts and demon summoning rituals. The long-term strategic balance between Imperial and Chaos forces had been fundamentally altered by the Gothic War's events and outcomes. Abaddon's demonstrated ability to coordinate massive multi-legion operations and capture archaeotech weapons represented a significant escalation in Chaos military capabilities that would influence Imperial defensive planning for centuries to come. The Warmaster's acquisition of technical knowledge about Blackstone fortress construction and operation provided the foundation for developing similar weapons within the Eye of Terror, potentially creating strategic assets that could threaten Imperial security throughout the galaxy. The Imperial response to this evolving threat involved accelerated research into ancient technologies and defensive systems that could counter archaeotech weapons, while military reforms emphasized rapid response capabilities and enhanced coordination between different Imperial organizations. The Gothic War had demonstrated that traditional Imperial advantages in numbers and industrial capacity could be neutralized by enemies possessing superior technology and supernatural capabilities, requiring fundamental changes in strategic thinking and resource allocation. The legacy of the 12th Black Crusade ultimately established the Gothic War as a pivotal conflict that marked the beginning of a new era in the eternal struggle between the Imperium and the forces of chaos. The lessons learned, technologies developed, and tactical innovations created during the six-year campaign would influence military doctrine and strategic planning throughout the galaxy, while the relationships forged between different Imperial organizations during the crisis provided the foundation for enhanced cooperation in future conflicts. The war's conclusion represented not an ending but a transformation, as both sides adapted to new realities and prepared for the inevitable continuation of their ancient conflict with enhanced capabilities and deeper understanding of their enemy's strengths and weaknesses.